I woke up inside a dragon egg, in a warm cave on a world called Velix, and somehow that was only the second strangest thing happening to me. Instinct moved before thought. My spine pressed against the shell, a crack snapped through the darkness, and I slammed forward until my wet head broke out into open air. The first things I saw were stalactites, a distant underground river, and a dark green claw in front of my face. Wait, that was my claw. Small scales, pale newborn talons, 5 fingers. Then a word rose from somewhere deeper than memory. Green dragon. I was a newborn green dragon. Then my mouth opened by itself, and my true name slipped out. Varen Oskeldrun. The moment the name landed, legacy remembrance smashed into my skull. The 5-colored dragon Mother Tiamat. The ladder of legends and gods. The bloodline of green dragons. The name of this world, Velix. I had been alive for minutes, and already received enough lore to make my brain beg for a refund. Pain forced my head down into my claws. I gasped and dark green mist surged from my throat. It hissed across the stone and corroded a patch of rock. I froze. That was a breath attack. A normal green wormling should only bite, scratch, and maybe spit corrosive saliva. Real breath attacks came later. My limbs were also sturdier than they should have been. So naturally, my first thought was that I had hatched defective. Aberrant dragon, limited edition disappointment. Another strange child for the dragon mother to sigh over. Then another memory woke up. No cave, no shell, no scales. I remembered burning rifts across a sea of stars. I remembered the whisper of a generous Ian that answered all living beings equally. I remembered walking for long years as a strider of abundance, healing refugees on broken frontier worlds, and mending a miner's shattered leg with warmth from my palm. And I remembered a passing Lord Ravager. Before I even understood what was happening, the aftershock erased me from existence. No final words, no glorious sacrifice, just cosmic collateral damage. Now I had reincarnated again, this time as a green dragon. A race famous for poison, deception, corruption, and ruining forests with professional enthusiasm. An abundant strider reborn as a green dragon. Healing and poison, rebirth and corruption. The joke was too precise to feel accidental. If the Ian of Elation had arranged this, then congratulations, aha. I hated it, but philosophy had to wait because I was starving. I looked at the shattered dark green eggshell around me, hesitated for 2 seconds and bit down. Crunch. It was crispy. The taste was impossible to explain, but not bad, which is a dangerous thing to learn about your own house. I ate every piece, then stumbled around the cave while my tail kept sabotaging my back legs like it had joined the enemy. After a dozen steps, I reached a puddle. My reflection stared back. I looked like a green wormling, but not quite the cruel, gloomy kind from my inheritance. My scales were lighter. My emerald-slit pupils were too bright. I looked almost closer to a metallic dragon hatchling than an evil one. The power of abundance had not changed my species. It had changed my temperaments. A green dragon walking the path of abundance sounded like a bard made it up after losing a bet. Then the practical problem arrived. A normal wormling should hatch with a dragon mother nearby. I sensed no guardian, no siblings, no dragon trace at all. Was I abandoned, or had something happened to my dragon mother? Sleep dragged at me before I could solve it. A newborn dragon's first slumber was not optional. Still, I sniffed around the nest before giving in. Damp rock, water vapor, and something else. A faint, unfamiliar scent seeping from a crack deeper inside the cave. Not dragons, not anything I knew, sharp enough to make my newborn scales tighten. I curled into the most hidden depression in the rock wall, half-covered myself with broken shell, and carved that scent into my remembrance before sleep took me. When I woke, the cave was the same, but my body was not. I had grown from a little bigger than a pony to nearly the size of an adult tiger. Life rank 3. A normal hatchling needed about a year to reach that stage. I had done it with 1 nap. The power of abundance was nourishing my soul and body nonstop, turning dragon growth into something dangerously unfair. The spell inheritance came next. Green dragon spells surfaced from my bloodline, and thanks to 2 lifetimes of mental energy plus experience with extraordinary power, I digested them absurdly fast. At rank 3 with spells and dragon racial talent, my combat power could probably touch rank 6. Rank 6 meant little in the Empire's core lands. Out here on the savage border where green dragons lived, it meant I could survive to adulthood if I did not volunteer for a 3rd death. I was very committed to not making dying a trilogy. The cave entrance was sealed by vines. I scratched them, breathed corrosive mist, watched them blacken, and shoved my way into daylight. Wind moved through leaves. Insects called, Unknown birds cried in the distance. This forest would become my territory. I stepped out carefully, learning my new body while fallen leaves swallowed the old path. After a quarter of an hour, a foul, fishy, demonic beast scent hit my nose. 20 steps away, the bushes exploded, and a rock wild boar burst out, huge as a small rhinoceros and wrapped in heavy stone armor. Rank 4, one rank above me. That would have sounded frightening if it had not been stupid. And if I had not been a dragon with spells, claws, fangs, and fresh emotional damage from cosmic murder. I attacked first. Magic flowed through my claws into the soil. More than a dozen thumb-thick vines burst up and wrapped the boar's legs. It screamed, twisted, and snapped a few thinner vines. Too late, I launched across the distance, crashed onto its spine, and drove my fangs into the gap between its stone hide and skull. Crack! The boar collapsed. No breath attack needed. No clever duel. Vine bind, pounce, neck bite. A few seconds. The Dragon Clan's starting line was basically everyone else's lifetime achievement. I dragged the boar back to the cave, tore open the stone armor, ate my fill, stored the rest in a cold, dark corner, drank from the underground river, and rested. Not far away, a kobold hunting team found the aftermath. Kobolds were common on the forest's outer edge. Short, hunched, lizard-headed, sharp-nosed, and willing to eat almost anything. Their leader caught my scent in the blood-stained mud and locked up. He had never seen a dragon, but every kobold in this world dreamed of having a true dragon lord. Their bloodline did not politely suggest kneeling. It grabbed their spines and folded them into the dirt. The whole hunting team dropped low. Fear came first, then excitement burned through it. The leader grabbed the mud like treasure and sprinted back to the tribe. His name was Grick, which in kobold basically meant the guy who trips over his own claws when he runs. Beautiful parenting. Lasting damage. But that night, Grick did not trip once. He reached the campfires, gasped for Chief Brack, and opened his claws to show the dragon-scented mud. Brack was the largest kobold in the tribe, twice as broad as normal, with dark green scales across his back from thin dragon blood awakening. The moment he smelled the mud, he snapped upright. His pupils narrowed, and a low whimper escaped him before he noticed. Then Sivrin came out. Brack's younger brother was a frail kobold warlock with muddy yellow flames burning in his eyes. He snatched the mud, smelled it, closed his eyes, and opened them with his voice shaking. True dragon, it's a true dragon. To kobolds, following a dragon was not humiliation. It was the only road upwards. Dragon vein transformation could turn short-lived kobolds into dragonkin with longer lives. Brack and Sivrin already owed their positions to a trace of dragon blood, so thin it still would not let them live past an ordinary human lifespan. Now a real dragon was nearby. Brack asked how many knew. Grick said only the hunting team, and he had forbidden them to spread it. Brack picked up his stone axe. They left at once. An hour later, I sensed them from inside the cave. Before returning, I had planted a spell seed on a crooked tree 30 paces from the entrance. With abundance catalyzing it, the seed rooted in minutes and shared vision with me. So I watched more than a dozen kobolds approach. Legacy Remembrance said kobolds were a classic vassal race for dragons. Useful, loyal, also potentially troublesome. If they already served another dragon, accepting them would be less new followers acquired. And more congratulations, you angered someone bigger. I stayed hidden and observed. Sivrin sensed the scouting spell when he stepped on the first vine. He warned the team, followed the aura, and soon found the torn vine entrance, claw marks, dried corrosive powder, and dragon scent. Then I released Dragon's Might. Not all of it, just enough. Brack dropped to one knee. Sivrin knelt. Grick flattened himself so completely he looked like he wanted to become part of the ground. I was controlling the pressure carefully while checking them for another dragon's aura. There was none. Most likely, they were masterless. Still, I waited. I could not scare away potential vassals, but I also could not let them think a lone wormling was easy to bargain with. Caution was not a personality trait at this age. It was survival. Sivrin understood first. He pressed his forehead to the ground and spoke in Draconic, introducing himself as the tribe's shaman, Brack as its leader, and offering 317 kobolds beneath Rock Hill, 10 miles north of the cave. 317. I had hatched alone that morning. By night, a whole tribe was asking to depend on me. That is not luck. That is the universe handing you a contract with tiny print. I stepped out, moonlight hit my scales, and the brothers froze. I was not a young dragon. I was still a wormling. Larger than normal, brighter-eyed than normal, but with wings not fully unfolded and a blunt newborn face. Sivrin noticed everything. No dragon mother, no siblings, no other dragon traces. A lone wormling using dragon's might to look larger than he was. Then he made the correct decision. A wormling was still a true dragon. Brack shifted to both knees, crossed his claws in the highest kobold allegiance posture, and begged me to accept their loyalty. I asked why. Sivrin answered honestly, their dragon blood was too thin. They would not live past 40. If they followed me and earned bloodline transformation, they could survive, and the tribe could grow stronger. Honesty mattered. I cut my chest with one claw, drew out a drop of dark green heart blood, tore 2 scales from beneath my ribs and chanted in Draconic. The blood split into 2 strands and infused the scales until they cooled into amber-like tokens. I gave them to Brack and Sivrin. Catch them, then swear the oaths. Brack pressed his scale to his chest without hesitation. It melted into him, leaving a dark green mark. Sivrin's scale sank into his palm, and the yellow flames in his eyes burned brighter as his magic surged. Together, they swore by blood and soul to follow the true dragon Varen unto death. If they betrayed me, dragon fire would consume their bodies. The covenant took effect. 2 faint threads wrapped around my consciousness. With one thought, I could tighten them. As long as my soul power suppressed theirs, they could not break the contract alone. Excellent paperwork, clear terms, immediate enforcement. I told them their tribe was now under my protection. Brack grinned. Sivrin did not, but the fire in his eyes burned bright. Grick and the others finally dared stand. A few young kobolds got so excited they made little gurgling sounds, until Grick slapped them quiet. 300 paces away, a gnoll scout watched from behind ferns. It had come to spy on the kobolds after Brack's tribe seized several mushroom patches from the gnolls. Instead, it saw the kobolds swear allegiance to a dragon. It did not understand the covenants. It understood dragon, so it backed away and vanished into the dark. That news was going west. Later that night, I sprawled on the largest rock in the kobold camp, while my new dependents finished their oath ceremony. 317 kobolds lived in a half-hidden depression beneath Rock Hill, packed into dugouts and animal skin tents that smelled like mushrooms, dirt, waste, and kobolds. Not pleasant, still better than corpse stink on war planets, so my standards were adapting. Sivrin explained the tribe's strength. 4 Tier 3 warriors, including Grick. About 100 Level 2 fighters with bones, stones, and a few rusted blades. The remaining 200 were Level 1 miners. Kobolds were born miners. They dug mushrooms and iron ore beneath Rock Hill, and occasionally fought goblins for territory. Brack was Level 4, strong enough to rule on the forest edge. Sivrin was Level 3, and because spellcasters were rare among kobolds, his fireballs made him second in command. For a newborn dragon, this was already absurdly good. A normal wormling my age would still be fighting siblings for meat in the dragon mother's lair. I had dependents. Then I asked about the mines. Sivrin pointed north of Rock Hill. 2 cave entrances, one for iron ore, one for mushrooms. Yes, mushrooms counted as ore. Kobolds called everything dug from the ground ore. Mushrooms were food ore, iron was weapon ore, terrible taxonomy, excellent consistency. There was also a salt mine half a day's journey west, seized by the gnolls. The gnoll tribe had over 200 members. Their leader, Koruk, was a Level 4 berserker. They had about 10 Tier 3 warriors, twice as many as the kobolds. But Brack could fight 3 Tier 3s alone and could hold Koruk back. So for 2 years, neither side had been able to swallow the other. The gnolls held the salt mine. The kobolds held Rock Hill. Everyone stayed angry. Then Sivrin mentioned the dangerous part. Recently, Koruk had been searching desperately for a breakthrough. Sacrifices, demonic beast blood, black oil, anything violent enough to push a berserker past his limit. Berserkers were like that. The closer they came to death, the more likely they were to find power. Most died first. I asked if anything abnormal had happened. Sivrin said no. The scouts sent out that day had not returned, but he thought it was probably nothing. Famous last words rarely announced themselves. For one short moment, the tribe almost felt peaceful. Mushrooms roasted by the fire. Brack sharpened his stone axe. Warriors cleaned weapons. Grick yawned and got mushrooms shoved into his mouth by another kobold. I rested my chin on my claws and felt abundance moving steadily through me. Not the explosive growth of my first sleep, but constant nourishment. At this rate, in 2 or 3 months, I might touch Level 5, assuming everything went smoothly. Under that same moon, Koruk sat cross-legged on an old stump with 2 hand axes across his knees. He had been there for 2 days. 2 days earlier, he had swallowed the 3rd bucket of black oil dug from an abandoned vein. The first 2 buckets had nearly killed him. He did not expect the 3rd to work. This time it did. Heat burned through his blood. His spine arched. A hoarse roar tore from his throat as something locked deep inside him snapped open. After 30 years, Koruk became a Level 5 berserker. The gnoll camp woke to his roar. His claws had thickened, nails lengthened, and old scars glowed dark red under the moon. Then the scout returned. The kobolds had pledged to a green dragon. Maybe a fledgling, small, wings not fully unfolded, Korok went silent, then his breathing grew heavy. A fledgling dragon on the forest edge. He grabbed the scout by the neck and demanded certainty. But the scout had not dared approach too closely. Korok dropped him, picked up both handaxes, and ordered every gnoll to take weapons. One Tier 3 warrior hesitated because of Brack. Korok said he would kill Brack himself. The others only had to surround the dragon until he finished Brack and Sivrin. Then he told them why. Kill the dragon, bathe in dragon blood, break the limits of Gnoll blood, reach toward Great Master level, maybe even the legendary Gnoll King. Every Gnoll present would get a share. The camp fell silent. Then the howls began. Over 200 gnolls grabbed bones, stones, rusted iron, and torches. Korok walked at the front, axes in hand, with the firelight swaying behind him like a crooked red tide. Back beneath Rock Hill, I raised my head. The scouting seed at the tribe's edge sent back dense movement. Many bipedal creatures, light steps, too many, getting closer. Before I could speak, a kobold scout burst into camp covered in mud, one arm bleeding. He tripped 10 steps from my rock, smashed his chin into the ground, and still pushed himself up to wail toward the west. The gnolls were coming, all of them. Korok had reached level 5s. Brack's expression changed. His greatest enemy had crossed the line while he remained where he was. Sivrin was already on his feet with his staff. I stayed prone on the rock and looked down at my claws. Still fledgling-sized, sharp enough to matter, but not large enough to make this easy. Not even midnight. I had hatched, eaten my eggshell, killed a rank 4 rock wild boar, accepted 317 kobolds, signed a blood covenant, inherited a border war. And now a level 5 berserker was marching in to bathe in my blood. Some newborns get lullabies. I got governance. I lifted my head toward the black western forest, where shapes moved beneath the trees. Sivrin, he looked up. I told him to pull the line back 50 steps and call up every miner from the caves. Anyone who could lift a stone had to come out. Sivrin froze for half a breath, then nodded and started giving orders. Brack pulled his stone axe from the ground and walked to the front of my rock. He faced west without speaking, planting the axe into the earth while the dark green scales along his spine rose in the firelight. Above the distant forest, clouds swallowed half the moon. Something moved under the trees, and the sound of countless feet crossing dead leaves came closer. The gnolls arrived faster than disaster should be allowed to move. One kobold scout lay outside the tribe with his ear pressed to the ground, listening to the western forest. The moment he heard paws crushing dead leaves and tried to run, a hand shot out from the bushes, grabbed him by the neck and lifted him into the air. Korok's notched handaxe flashed once. The scout fell in 2 pieces. Charge in! More than 200 pairs of gnoll eyes lit up behind him. The kobold tribe had already formed a line in the clearing. Brack stood in front with his stone axe, the dark green scales along his back bristling. Sivrin waited 10 steps behind him, staff in hand, still carrying the shame of a half-cancelled fireball that had burned 10% of his mana for nothing. 4 level 3 kobold warriors led about 100 level 2 fighters. Grick stood on the left, and behind them the miners gripped hoes, stone picks, and little mushroom shovels like those tools had suddenly become holy weapons. Their legs shook, their tails tucked, but not one kobold looked back. Then the gnolls hit them. The clearing turned into mud, teeth, bone blades, fur, and blood. 10 huge level 3 gnoll warriors slammed into the front. Kobolds were hacked down. Gnolls had skulls cracked open by stone picks. Grick took a bone hammer to his left arm so hard everything below his elbow went limp, and he still kept stabbing with his right hand. Bodies dropped everywhere. Some kobolds and gnolls died locked together, teeth still buried in each other's throats. I watched from the large rock above the battlefield. I did not throw myself into 200 gnolls just to look brave. I had barely hatched a few months ago, and after 3 lives, I understood the difference between courage and rushing into the stew pot with dramatic lighting. But I was not idle. My mana slipped through the rock, into the mud, and along roots beneath the clearing. Wherever the kobold line began to crack, vines burst out. A gnoll raised its blade over a fallen miner, and 3 ink-green vines yanked its ankles from under it. The miner grabbed his pick and smashed the back of its head. Another vine tripped a charging warrior just long enough for Grick to drive his spear between its ribs. A third wrapped a gnoll's wrist mid-swing, forcing its bone hammer into its own companion's shoulder. Small pulls, short binds, one ruined step at exactly the wrong moment. It was not glorious. It worked, until Brack fell. His stone axe slipped out of his hands and rolled through the mud. A diagonal wound had opened him from collarbone to ribs, blood pouring down his chest with every breath. He tried to stand once and failed, tried again and only managed to half kneel. Korok stood over him, old scars glowing dark red. Berserk, his muscles bulged, his veins rose, and his eyes had drowned in red haze. One axe dripped with Brack's blood. The other still carried the notch Brack had cut into it 2 years before. Korok stepped past Brack and looked at Sivrin. Sivrin poured his remaining mana into one crooked fireball. It struck Korok's shoulder and burst into sparks, filling the clearing with the smell of burnt fur. Korok did not stop. He walked through the blast, smashed Sivrin's staff apart with one axe and drove the handle into Sivrin's stomach. Sivrin flew backward, hit the mud, and coughed blood down over the ink-green scale mark on his chest. His eyes stayed open, but his pupils were already fading. Brack roared through blood foam and tried to rise. His knees gave out. Korok kept walking towards Sivrin because now, in his mind, no one was left to stop him. Then my breath attack skimmed past his nose. The grass touched by the dark green mist withered, sprouted new buds, then rotted again. Corrosion and rebirth flickered across the same leaves so fast the whole clearing seemed to twist in place. Korok threw himself backward, plowing 2 deep tracks in the mud before he hit a stump. A few drops had touched his chest, burning away fur and exposing raw red flesh. He looked up. I had come down from the rock. All 4 claws pressed into the ground. My tail swept slowly behind me. My wings were still wrinkled against my sides, not ready for real flight, but my emerald scales flashed cold under the moonlight. The battlefield paused. That was not tactics. That was bloodline fear. Every monster in the clearing felt it. Korok smiled and said I was finally willing to come down. I ignored him and looked at the battles. Grick's arm hung uselessly, but he was still standing. Most of the level 3 kobold warriors had fallen. The miners were dying 3 or 4 at a time for every knoll they dragged down. The gnolls had lost half their elites too, yet neither side retreated. The kobolds would not retreat because their true dragon was watching. The gnolls would not retreat because Korok had promised them dragon blood, and too many had already died to turn back empty-handed. Korok spun both axes and said he would take my heart. Then he charged. No testing, no speech. Berserk had stripped him down to one command: split the dragon's chest open. I slid aside instead of taking the first blow. His axe scraped my shoulder scales, throwing sparks but failing to break through. I snapped out a draconic spell, and vines burst from the mud around his ankles. Korok cut them apart in 2 strokes. More vines came from every side, grabbing wrists, knees, ankles, anything they could catch. He tore through them and kept closing. So I changed spells. The mud split open, and arm-thick wooden spikes stabbed upward toward his chest and stomach. He twisted through the gaps like a starving wolf, losing fur and drawing blood but barely slowing. 10 steps. I backed up and activated Life Drain. Green light seeped from my scales into the plants around us. Grass yellowed, leaves dulled. Their vitality flowed back to me through the soil, not enough to decide the battle by itself, but enough to keep my strength from dropping too fast. 3 steps. I stopped retreating and whipped my tail sideways. The blow caught Korok clean. He flew off the ground, spun through the air, and crashed spine first into an old tree hard enough to rain leaves over his body. One axe flew from his hand and stuck trembling in the mud. For a moment, the clearing remembered a simple fact. Even a wormling was still a dragon. Korok dragged himself up with his ribs caved in and laughed through blood. Then he reached into a filthy pouch and pulled out a small wooden bottle. Black oil, the violent substance from the abandoned mine. The thing that had helped him reach level 5s. He bit the cork open and drank everything left. His body cracked from the inside. Muscles swelled, bones stretched, old scars split open and leaked dark red light. He threw away his last axe, dropped onto all 4s and stopped looking like a gnoll at all. Then he lunged. His speed nearly doubled. I had no time to cast. I raised my forepaws to protect my throat and took the impact head-on. His fangs bit into my left forearm, and we rolled through the mud together. I tore his belly open with one claw, but he did not care. He snapped for the thinner scales between my shoulder and neck, one of the few places a small creature could hurt a dragon. I turned my head just in time. His teeth carved 3 shallow grooves along my neck instead. Blood ran dark green. I forced out another spell. Vines wrapped his hind legs and held for one precious instant before snapping. That instant let me get my feet under me again. There was no more distance to play with. Korok was too fast now, so the fight became ugly and close. I caught his jaws with my forepaws, kicked his stomach with my hind legs, and let vines keep growing, breaking, and growing again around him. Life Drain kept pulling vitality from the grass and trees. The old trees' leaves curled black at the edges and fell around us like ash. Korok fought like a creature that had sold tomorrow for one more minute of strength. So I waited for tomorrow to collect. His breathing grew heavier. The red light on his scars dimmed. His swollen muscles began to shrink. The black oil's borrowed power was fading. When he bit my forearm again, his teeth only left white marks. That was the moment. I struck his chest with one claw, using nothing fancy, just the raw force of the dragon clan. Korok flew backward, hit the mud, slid more than a dozen feet, and smashed into a stone. He lay there staring at the moon, broken nails digging into the ground. His last roar was not mockery. It was resentment. Was a gnoll always meant to crawl in the mud? Was he never allowed to stand? He was not resigned. Then his voice faded. The whole battlefield went silent. The surviving kobolds cheered because I had won. The surviving gnolls dropped their weapons and knelt. The dead did nothing. They simply lay there, proving victory had not been clean. I did not give Korok a speech. I released a thin breath attack over him, and within minutes his corpse dissolved into a strange puddle. At dawn, the cost became clear. Brack had 3 broken ribs and a wound from collarbone to ribs. Sivrin had 2 broken ribs. Both would be bedridden for at least half a month. Of the 4 level 3 kobold warriors, only 1 survived. Of about 100 level 2 warriors, only 23 remained. The miners suffered worst of all. More than 200 had been reduced to just over 50. The gnolls were ruined too. All 10 of their level 3 warriors were dead. More than half their level 2 fighters were gone, and only 30 survivors still knelt in the clearing. There was no clean winner, only the side still breathing. I told the 30 gnolls they could join my tribe if they survived one final selection. Then I picked them in pairs and made them fight. No honor, no brotherhood, survival. One by one, the weaker or more wounded fell. The winners were barely winners at all, with broken fingers, missing teeth, and torn ears, but they were alive. In the end, 15 gnolls knelt before me. They became the lowest members of the Abundance tribe. Patrols, guard duty, mining, stone hauling, garbage clearing, every filthy and exhausting job belonged to them. I also promised they would not starve and would not be killed casually. The tribe needed labor. They would live, breed, and make the tribe larger. That was mercy in the shape this world could understand. At noon, one kobold team cleaned the battlefield, buried bodies, gathered weapons, and salvaged trampled mushrooms. Another went to the gnoll camp, led by Grick with his broken arm tied against his chest. By evening, Grick returned with 2 wooden barrels filled with thick black liquid. Black oil. I leaned close and smelled it. Unlike the gentle vitality I drew from plants, this energy was violent, irritable, and absurdly rich. I licked one drop, and a burning line shot from my tongue to my stomach. Green light licked between my scales. Even a dragon's ridiculous digestive system needed a moment to handle it. For ordinary people, black oil was an alchemy material. For dragons, it was a supreme tonic with terrible flavor. For me, with abundance already pushing my growth, it was a shortcut wearing a warning label. I had the kobolds move both barrels to the top of Rock Hill. Before drinking, I checked Brack and Sivrin in the largest tent. They were unconscious under thick beast skin bandages, but alive. I told the guards that once the brothers woke, the tribe would still be managed by them. Then I returned to the hilltop, dug a shallow pit, curled into it, sealed the cave entrance with vines, opened both barrels, and drank. Sleep came almost immediately. Outside, kobolds repaired the fence, and 15 defeated gnolls carried stones. On the edge of Sunset Forest, a new tribe had survived its first night. Its name was Abundance, and its dragons slept above it. 3 years passed. No one touched the vine-sealed cave on Rock Hill. The vines spread across the top, crawled down the cliff face, and wrapped half the hill in dark green. Tribe members rarely dared look up when passing below. They knew their master was still sleeping. Inside, my body kept growing. My back pressed near the cave ceiling. My wings unfolded properly at last. Even in sleep, I could sense the tribe below while the green dragon bloodline and the power of abundance pushed me forward together. And below me, the abundance tribe changed. Brack reached level 6. Sivrin reached level 5. Grick reached level 4. Emerald scales appeared on Sivrin's hand, proof that my dragon blood was transforming him further. In the first year, Brack and Sivrin led the surviving kobolds to absorb 3 nearby kobold tribes. It was almost too simple. Brack planted his iron axe in the ground. The other chieftains smelled the true dragon contract on him, and they knelt. The population passed 500. In the second year, the tribe gained something even better than levels. 2 escaped dwarven slaves from the Jaya Duchy fled into Sunset Forest, and were nearly taken by goblins before a gnoll patrol dragged them back. The dwarves knew forging. With their help and the ore from the old gnoll mine, the Abundance tribe stepped out of the Stone Age and into the Iron Age. Brack got an iron axe. Kobold warriors began receiving iron spearheads. The tribe stopped looking like a desperate camp and started looking like a small power. By the third year, its population passed 1,000. over 1,000 kobolds, more than 400 level 2 warriors, 50 level 3 champions, and more than 300 gnolls. The gnolls had fewer high-level fighters and did the hardest work while eating the least, not because Brack was trying to be cruel, but because food and weapons were still limited. Kobolds came first. The gnolls accepted it for one simple reason. The strongest among them was level 4. Brack was level 6. In Velik's, weakness was not an argument. It was a sentence. Then trouble walked out of the deeper forest. A tribe of more than 50 ogres appeared, led by a mutated two-headed ogre named Rock. He was level 9, could cast spells, and had been driven from deeper territory by half-elves. On the way out, his starving tribe had eaten demonic beasts, bark smaller tribes, and when hunger became bad enough, even meat from their own bodies. Their first contact with the Abundance tribe was the Western Patrol Post. 3 gnolls were stationed there. 2 died, 1 crawled back with the reports. That night, Brack and Sivrin sat together until the campfire nearly died. The next morning, the tribe began building a wall. It was crude, logs around the expanded settlement, dirt piled behind them, 4 corner watch platforms made of tied logs and boards, and a gate patched together from waste slabs taken from the dwarf mine. Rock Hill, where I slept, sat in the center behind the innermost defenses. It was not a fortress. It was something to hide behind while praying the dragon woke up. The ogres arrived on the evening of the 3rd day. Birds exploded from the forest canopy. The ground trembled. Trees at the edge of the woods were shoved aside, and Rock stepped out carrying half a jagged iron pillar like a toy. Behind him came roughly 50 ogres with stone hammers, bone clubs, and uprooted trees. They stared at the wall and grinned. One of Rock's heads asked if the big thing inside would be delicious. The other spat bone fragments and asked where it was. No one answered. Brack stood on the wall with his iron axe. Sivrin stood beside him with a fireball glowing at his staff tip. Grick waited on the other side with an iron spear. Inside the stockade, miners grabbed iron picks, and gnolls were dragged from the mines and handed sharpened wooden sticks. Rock studied the 3-meter wall and laughed. Just this. Then he picked up a tree stump and threw it. The stump buried itself in the stockade wall, and silence fell over the defenders. Sivrin said the wall would not last. A level 9 mutated two-headed ogre could smash it open with his fists if he stopped playing. Rock did stop playing. He gestured, and the ogres began throwing everything they could lift. Stones and logs hammered the wall. Wood cracked, dirt spilled from between the logs. Defenders were knocked backward and thrown off the top. Brack shattered 1 boulder with his axe. Sivrin blew 3 stumps apart with fireballs. Grick knocked a huge stone aside with his spear. Several level 4 fighters stepped up too. It was still not enough. A miner saw the person beside him lose half his head to a rock. Blood and brain matter hit his face. He screamed, dropped his pick, and ran for the ladder. That was all fear needed. Kobolds dropped tools. Gnolls dropped sticks. They shoved each other toward the way down. Grick jumped from the wall and landed in front of the ladder. The first deserter was a young gnoll. Grick drove his spear through the deserter's chest, pulled it out, planted it in the ground, and stared up at the rest. Anyone who retreated again, he said, would die on his spear first. Dying in an ogre's mouth could at least become fertilizer. Dying by his spear would not even deserve the pot. No one moved after that. Rock laughed at them and prepared to order another volley. Then both of his heads lifted at once. A voice came from the top of Rock Hill, clear enough for every defender, deserter, and ogre to hear. Oh, is that so? The vines sealing the cave snapped apart. Emerald vertical pupils opened in the dark. I had woken up to find filthy ogres beating my people against my wall. I spread my wings. This time they opened fully. With 1 flap, I launched from the cave and rose above the stockade gate. My emerald scales caught the fading sunlight. My body had reached 8 meters, far larger than when I first slept. I looked down at the ogres. Stupid, filthy ogres. Just what do you take life for? Brack and Sivrin knelt first. Then the others followed, one after another, until even the wounded quieted and stared upward. Someone shouted the name that had not been called for 3 years, and soon the whole wall was roaring it. Outside, the ordinary ogres only stared. A few muttered that I was smaller than the dragon deep in the forest. Rock did not laugh. My body was still only that of a young dragon, but the magic leaking from me made the power inside him tremble. 1 dragon in the sky, 1 two-headed ogre on the ground. The tribe held its breath because everyone understood the same thing at once. The walls no longer mattered. The next battle would decide whether Abundance survived. I flew above the stockade wall and looked down at my tribe. Brack, Sivrin, and everyone else were still kneeling. Some of the kobolds had never seen me before. They stared up with tears in their eyes like a legend had descended, which was touching, but also deeply inconvenient because ogres were currently outside the wall trying to turn them into paste. 3 years? I had slept for 3 years, and while I was curled up under vines, these whelps had grown the tribe from a few hundred into more than 1,000. They had even built a wall. Yes, the wall now had boulder-shaped holes in it, but that only proved the wall had been useful enough to be attacked. I looked toward the ogres and called Brack. His shoulders trembled when he heard my voice again. I ordered every warrior above level 2 out through the gate to form a front line. The gnolls would circle through the western forest and hit the ogre's flank once the charge began. Level 1 miners would dig traps in front of the wall. Pits, stakes, tripwires, anything they could make before the ogres reached them. Brack roared the orders, and the stockade snapped from panic into movement. Kobolds grabbed iron spears. Miners ran out with hoes and picks. More than 300 gnolls slipped down the wall and vanished toward the western forest. A moment earlier, the defenders had been trying to flee. Now a green dragon was in the sky, and suddenly everyone remembered they had jobs. Ugly management, yes. Still management. The ogres advanced. The first one stepped into a pit. The hole was not deep enough to kill an ogre, but the bottom was packed with wooden spikes I had grown with magic after the kobolds dug it. The spikes punched into its calves and stayed there, blocking its regeneration. It screamed, and before the others understood the danger, several more ogres fell into the trap line. That slowed them. Then the stockade gate opened. Brack walked out first with his iron axe. Behind him came 400 level 2 kobold warriors in a shield wall. Short iron spears angled through the gaps. 50 level 3 warriors held the second row. Brack slammed his axe into the mud and shouted for the Dragon of Abundance. 400 kobolds struck the ground with their spear shafts and shouted back. The ogres came around the traps with boulders, clubs, and uprooted trees. The first impact shattered the front row. Shields split, kobolds flew. The second row filled the gap immediately, and spears stabbed out at legs, throats, and spines. Brack roared the only rule that mattered. Hit the spine, hit the back of the neck, use fire. Belly wounds were useless against ogres. Then the gnolls burst from the western forest. Their level 4 leader charged first, and more than 300 gnolls crashed into the ogre's sides and backs. They leapt up, bit necks, tore at windpipes, and clung on even when swatted away. The kobolds pressed from the front. The gnolls ripped from behind. In the first wave, 14 ogres fell. The price was bloody but acceptable, so I fixed my eyes on Rock. Your turn. I folded my wings and dove. Wind screamed past my ears. Under 30 meters, I opened my wings and turned the drop into a diagonal sweep across the ogre formation. My throat swelled, poison glands compressed, and dark green breath attack washed over 7 or 8 ogres. Fur rotted, skin blistered, 2 fell immediately, while the rest staggered and screamed. The edge of the breath reached Rock's shoulder. His left head reacted fast and cast shield. A blue barrier caught the mist and splashed it away, shaking but holding. The right head roared at me and fired 3 scorching rays. I spoke one short draconic syllable. My body flickered and 3 mirror images split from me. The fire rays burned through 2 illusions, leaving 1 clone still crossing the sky beside me. Rock's left head almost choked. A young dragon using mirror image was not in his script. I did not give him time to rewrite it. A cyan halo wrapped around me. Haste, I climbed, dove again, and saw the left head begin chanting a 4th circle fireball. Too slow, I shot past Rock's face and slapped the casting head with my right claw. The spell broke in his hand. Fireball mana exploded at his fingertips and burned half the left head black. The right head froze, then laughed at him, and the 2 heads started arguing mid-battle like siblings who happened to share one massive murderous body. The ground fight kept worsening. Brack's shield wall still held. Sivrin used web to trap ogres for the kobolds to stab through, and the gnolls tore at the flanks. But our casualties were rising fast. The ogres had dropped below 30, yet 200 or 300 kobolds and gnolls already lay on the ground. Then Rock's right head pointed his staff at the sky. Lightning struck my right wing. No mirror images left. The bolt blasted scales black, surged through the wing membrane and made my muscles spasm. I almost nosedived before forcing myself onto the stockade wall. My right wing drooped, smoking and charred, while the power of abundance began repairing it under the burnt scales. Then I heard both of Rock's heads mutter that at least they still had a trump card. Noted, very noted. The battlefield buckled first. Ogre regeneration was miserable to fight. One had its belly pierced, fell down, got stabbed twice more, then simply stood back up after the wound sealed with fresh steaming flesh. Brack kept shouting for spine and neck strikes, but that was hard when a kobold could barely reach an ogre's waist. Less than half the level 2 kobold warriors were still standing. More than 30 of the 50 level 3 champions had fallen. Of the 300 gnolls, barely over 100 could still fight. Their level 4 leader had a crushed leg and was still dragging himself forward to create openings. Sivrin knelt on high ground with blood leaking from his eyes, almost out of mana. He spent his last strength on 2 spells. First, Web wrapped 4 clustered ogres into one struggling mass. Second, a simulated green dragon breath attack poured dark green poison from his mouth. It was weaker than mine, but it slowed their regeneration enough for kobolds to swarm in and stab through the web until the ogres stopped moving. Then Sivrin collapsed. Brack killed 3 ogres by himself, but by the third he was finished too. A giant club came down toward his back. I landed in front of him. The club struck my left wing membrane and bounced off, leaving only a white mark. My tail whipped sideways and turned the attacking ogre's upper body into blood mist. I looked back at Brack. "Lie down." He lay down. "Excellent, Commander. Excellent listener." My right wing was healing but not ready for clean flight, so I walked toward Rock through the corpses. An ogre tried to block me. I swept it aside with my tail, and a gnoll immediately jumped onto its neck. Rock's right head cast Stinking Cloud. Yellow-green poison mist swallowed half the clearing. Kobolds and gnolls coughed and collapsed inside it. I kept walking. I am a green dragon. Casting poison at me is not strategy. It is career confusion. When I emerged from the cloud, the charred left head cursed the right head for being an idiot. The right head snapped back and cast Bear's Endurance on himself. Rock's body swelled. Muscle hardened, fat thickened, he grew even larger. I could not let the buffs continue. I charged and drove both front claws into his body. Then I hit the problem. Bear's Endurance had made his flesh too thick. My claws lodged in and would not pull free. Rock slapped me away. I smashed through a broken stump, climbed out of the wood chips, and got hit by 3 magic missiles that cracked scales on my chest and shoulders. That was the last insult I was willing to accept. I sank my consciousness into my body and awakened the power of abundance together with the green dragon bloodline. The forest answered. Grass grew wildly. Flowers bloomed, withered, and bloomed again in seconds. I pressed my claw into the ground. In the name of the power of abundance, tree roots burst from under Rock's feet, each as thick as an arm. They wrapped around him. He tore one apart, but sticky sap clung to his skin and rooted into his flesh. More roots drilled up, locked his arms open, wove across his back, and kept growing. Both heads screamed. The roots did not stop. In a dozen seconds, the level 9 mutated 2-headed ogre was no longer an ogre. He was a towering giant tree. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining 11 ogres stared at what used to be their leader and knelt in despair. That ended the battle. I bound the surviving ogres with vines and warned them not to move unless they wanted to die. Then I returned to the wall and asked for Sivrin. Grick carried him over. Sivrin was unconscious, bleeding from the mouth, and his life was hanging low. I placed a claw on his chest and poured in the power of abundance, suppressing the backlash from his forced simulated breath spell. His dragon blood was too thin for that power, but not too thin to save. He coughed up dark green stagnant blood, and his breathing finally steadied. Only then did I order an inventory before dark. Living, dead, able to move, unable to move. Then I lay down on the stockade gate. I had just woken from a 3-year sleep, and immediately fought a level 9 mutated 2-headed ogre. As a reward, I followed the sacred dragon tradition of taking a nap while everyone else handled the paperwork. When I woke again, my wing had recovered. The stockade was busy with corpses, repairs, captured ogres, and salvaged weapons. Grick crouched near the gate with his shoulder bandaged and still bleeding. Brack had woken briefly, eaten, and fallen asleep again. Sivrin was still unconscious, but stable. My blood, altered by abundance, had pushed both brothers far beyond normal kobolds. They would recover. Since Brack and Sivrin were down, I told Grick to manage the tribe for now. He froze like I had handed him both a crown and a tax ledger. But he was the highest-ranking kobold still standing and had followed me the longest. If he did not manage things, who would? Me? Absolutely not. I had already done war, medicine, and aggressive landscaping. I told him to hand authority back when the brothers woke, then spread my wings. Grick asked where I was going. I said I was going out to see the world. From above the canopy, Sunset Forest looked endless, but compared to 3 years ago, it felt much smaller. Back then, I had been wingless, cautious, and weak. Now I could fly. A strange pool caught my attention. Pale yellow mist hung over dark green soil, and on the mudflat rooted a wild boar coated in thick corrosive mucus. Venom pig, tier 3 monster, poisonous meat, inedible to most creatures. Then my bloodline remembrance offered a very important ancestral note. When venom pig toxin reacted with green dragon stomach acid, it became extremely delicious. That was not combat knowledge. That was civilization. I dove, grabbed the venom pig by the spine, ignored the mucus corroding my palm like spicy hand lotion, and killed it with one bite to the neck. When I tasted the meat, the old green dragon who wrote that note earned my eternal respect. Tender, rich, juicy, a faint pine resin aftertaste. After fighting ogres, this was not lunch. This was emotional compensation. I caught 2 cubs too, 1 bite each, crunchy. By the time I finished, that meal ranked among the top 3 of all my lives. I decided Brack and Sivrin would raise venom pigs for me once they recovered. Daily venom pig, that is civilization with fangs. Then my mana perception caught movement. 8 life signatures, 1 weak mage running from 7 stronger pursuers. I did not want to move. I had eaten well. I was not the forest police. But my life had gone too smoothly. Reincarnation, Dragon Body, Kobold Tribe, 3-year growth, Ogre Victory. In stories, this is exactly when some plot character crashes into your day. If I ignored it, trouble would probably return later with interest. Besides, the strongest pursuer was only rank 7. That was no longer enough to scare me. So I flew toward them. A young noble girl named Leora Vale hid behind an oak, clutching a small crystal staff. Her once fine velvet dress was torn by thorns. One sleeve split open at the shoulder, and sweat glued blonde hair to her face. She had been running for 3 days. 7 knights had chased her into the forest. Their leader, Merk, was a tier 7 warrior and deputy captain of the Jaya Duchy Countess's guards. The other 6 had supposedly escorted Leora toward a political marriage with the northern earl. Now they carried the countess's real order: kill Leora and bring back her head. Leora had no idea why. Her maid had dragged her from bed in the night and warned her to run. Now her potions were gone, her mana was almost empty, and Merk had finally blocked her path. 6 knights raised crossbows. The bolts fired. Before they reached her, my shadow dropped from the sky, and vines burst up into a wall. The bolt struck the vines. I landed between Leora and the knights with my wings spread. 7 knights chasing a rank 3 little mage, I said in the common tongue. Your chivalry is quite interesting. Merk's horse stepped back. The knights froze. The Jaya Duchy had not seen a dragon in hundreds of years, and these men had accepted an assassination job, not a surprise dragon encounter. Merk forced himself calm and noticed my size. I was only about 8 meters long, young for a dragon, probably around rank 6 by his guess. He was rank 7 with 6 rank 3 knights. He could not win, but maybe he could retreat. He told them to back up slowly. As for Leora, he assumed she was finished anyway. She had elven bloodline, and green dragons were famous for loving the taste of elves. He was not wrong about the instinct. I smelled the elven bloodline immediately, and the green dragon part of me filed her under delicious. My tongue even moved before I stopped it. No, I did not come here after a perfect pork meal to eat a plot character. Standards matter. Leora understood the danger too. She put down her staff, bowed toward my back, and introduced herself as the legitimate daughter of Count Vale of the Jaya Duchy. If I killed the knights and escorted her back to the human world, she promised treasure and even slaves with elven bloodline. My ears twitched. Treasure was interesting. The offer was not. It was a blank check from someone currently standing in a forest with no bank. Before I answered, Merk attacked. He knew that if Leora convinced me, all 7 knights were dead. He lunged for her with a full-strength level 7 strike, hoping to kill her and retreat while the others covered him. I backhanded him with 1 claw. His steel breastplate caved in, and he crashed into a tree half-dead. The 6 knights reconsidered their future instantly. One dropped to his knees and shouted that they surrendered. Their families could pay ransom. The others quickly joined in, offering family names, gold amounts, even promises to bankrupt themselves. Fear makes everyone an accountant. Leora tried to ask if I would hand them over to her out of consideration for her face. I asked how many gold coins her face was worth. She went pale. Then I told the knights ransom could be discussed, but all of them were my prisoners now. As for Leora, I lowered my head close enough for her to see herself reflected in my pupils. Did she think my brain had not grown just because I had only hatched recently? Escort her back, let her contact her family, and wait for the duchy's great master powerhouses to surround my forest. I was generous, not suicidal. Their lives belonged to me until ransom was paid. Magic flowed into the mud, and vines wove 2 cages, one for the 6 knights and 1 separate cage for Leora. Even the 2-headed ogre would have needed time to break them. These humans had no chance. I grabbed 1 cage in each claw and flew back toward the tribe. The knights crashed into each other inside their cage. Leora sat in her own, watching the forest shrink below with despair in her eyes. Today's harvest was excellent. 3 venom pigs in my stomach, 7 knights for ransom, and 1 count's legitimate daughter with elven bloodline. I had not planned to meddle, but once I did, profit needed to happen. By evening, the Abundance tribe's stockade appeared ahead. At the gate, Grick looked up and saw me arriving with 2 vine cages full of humans. "Master," he shouted, "didn't you say you were going out to see the world?" I lowered the cages into the open space. The knights tumbled into a pile, and Merc groaned like landing had made every injury worse. I folded my wings on the stockade gate. I've seen it. Then I looked at the prisoners. I casually brought back some local specialties. After throwing the captives to Grick, I returned to Rock Hill, lay down, and immediately felt something was missing. Then I remembered the venom pig. One memory of that taste, and my brain filed an emergency request. Ogres were temporary, pork cravings were eternal. I stood, shook out my wings, and flew off again. This time I followed the stream north from the pool and found a larger venom pig family. 2 boars, 4 sows, and 8 piglets. I showed discipline, personal growth, even vision. I only ate 1 boars. Then I wove vine cages around the rest and carried them home. By dusk the next day, I dropped a bag full of angry, venom-spitting pigs into the center of the stronghold. One splash hit a kobold's leg and made him howl. Grick stared at the bag like I had brought back a new religion. I told him they were venom pigs. 1 boar for breeding, 4 sows for pregnancy, 8 cubs to raise. The pen had to be near water, built from stone because their mucus-corroded wood, kept muddy but not flooded and guarded properly. Anyone who starved or killed one would mine ore for a month. Grick slowly asked if we were raising pigs now. Yes, he said kobolds had never raised creatures like this before. Wonderful. Learn. I handed him the rope and told him my future venom pig freedom depended on them. He caught it while the boar sprayed venom onto his foot, and white smoke hissed from his scales. Agricultural policy was already producing suffering. Grick turned around and roared at 2 miners to find stones and build the pig pen. Only after securing the tribe's most important new project did I remember the humans. The captives had been kept in a reinforced dugout. The 6 knights were together. Merc was separated because he was tier 7 and half dead, and Leora's cage had been placed alone near the ogre captives. Yes, that was intentional. She had barely slept for 2 days. Everywhere she looked were kobolds, gnolls, and ogres. The ogres stared at her through the fence with pure appetite in their eyes. Book illustrations had not prepared her for the smell. When the guards brought everyone out, Leora stepped into sunlight looking pale, cracked-lipped, and exhausted, but still somehow noble. The 6 knights knelt in a row. Merc lay to the side, breathing weakly. I told them to explain who they were, where they came from, and why they hunted her. If they explained clearly, I would consider their ransom. If not, their next room would include ogres. Truth arrived quickly. They were guards from the Forest Earldom in the Jaya Duchy. Their official mission had been to escort Leora north for a political marriage with the Northern Earl. 2 days before departure, the old head guard was suddenly transferred away, then found dead in a ditch with 3 stab wounds in his back. Merc took command, claimed it was an accident, changed their route, and revealed the Countess's secret order: kill Leora in Sunset Forest and blame monsters. The Countess was Leora's stepmother. Leora's father had died 3 years earlier. By law, the forest title should pass to the eldest legitimate daughter, but Leora had only been 14, so her stepmother ruled as regent. After 3 years in power, the regent had become attached to the chair. To claim the title cleanly, she needed Leora dead. Each knight had been promised 50 gold coins. They claimed they were forced, but the shape of the story was obvious. Stepmother murders stepdaughter for inheritance. Different world, same old script. Leora looked exhausted, not surprised. She already knew her stepmother hated her. After her father's death, the regent had stripped away her servants, seized the family industries under her control, and arranged a marriage to an older northern earl rumored to have ruined his first 2 wives. Her maid was dead. Her guards had betrayed her. Her own family wanted her head. As a human, she had been hunted by humans and rescued by a monster. I looked at her and felt a different kind of excitement. An earl's legitimate daughter, legal inheritance rights, elven bloodline, a path into human noble society. My tribe had hit a bottleneck. Population growing, food tight, iron useful but limited, trade nearly non-existent. Leora was not just a captive. She was a key. Then she stepped forward and asked if I was interested in the wealth of a count's family that had been passed down for hundreds of years. Now that was a sentence. I changed posture immediately. I asked why I should believe her. Leora explained that her stepmother had no true inheritance right. As long as Leora lived, the regent was only a caretaker. If Leora returned with enough power behind her, she could reclaim the title. I could not enter the human world openly, and humans would not negotiate with a chromatic dragon, but they would negotiate with her. She would be my proxy. The House of Forest property, mines, caravan taxes, and treasury would become mine. I would not need to show my face. I only had to stand behind her. The farther away I stood, the more afraid they would be. Good revenge plan, good business plan, excellent overlap. I asked what would stop her from taking the title, and then inviting the Jaya Duchy's great master powerhouses to hunt me. She looked me in the eyes and said she would sign a master-servant contract. That got my attention. She knew exactly what it meant. Soul binding. If I died, she died. If she betrayed me, she died. A single thought from me could torture her, and any attempt to harm me would backlash through the contract. Her tone stayed calm. Her father was dead. Her maid was dead. Her old guards were dead or traitors. Her stepmother wanted her killed. At 17, everything she had either died, betrayed her, or waited for her death. So if she had nothing left, she might as well sign the contract and drag her enemies down with her. I laughed and accepted. A drop of dark green blood floated from my claw to her forehead. I spoke the draconic syllables, and the contract formed. Green light flashed, then shrank into a tiny mark visible only up close. A thread settled between her soul and mine. My mood was excellent. The 6 knights went pale. Their ransom hopes had just met a very quiet death. Leora's first suggestion, as my servant, was to keep them. They came from knight families that had served House Forest for generations. Their loyalty was damaged, yes, but Tier 3 knights would be useful when she returned. I did not want to waste my own contract quota on them. 6 Tier 3 knights were less exciting than venom pigs. At least the pigs tasted good. So I told Leora to bind them herself. She was my servant, and they were originally House Forest retainers. Her subordinates would be my subordinates' subordinates. Tidy hierarchy, corporate structure but with more screaming. The youngest knight knelt first. The others followed because the alternative was the ogre cell. Then Leora turned to Merki. He had survived my slap, the filthy cell, and 2 days of neglect. Impressive but not useful enough to save. Leora ordered the 6 newly contracted knights to kill him. They understood the meaning, no road back. The youngest picked up a rock and struck first. The other 5 followed. Leora recorded it with a first circle image recording spell, then ordered Merk's corpse fed to the ogres. No drama, no speech, just a line crossed. I gave Leora and the 6 knights 7 days to recover before returning to the Jaya Duchy. During that time, she would help organize the tribe. She had studied territory management, accounts, construction, and demonic beast husbandry. My kobolds were useful, loyal, and enthusiastic, but brains were not exactly our leading export. Leora started with the wall. The ogre attack had punched several breaches through it. Kobolds were already filling them with stone and logs, but she spotted problems immediately. Shallow drainage ditches that would fail in rainy season, no firing ports near the gate, and watchtowers too thin to stand firm in strong wind. She picked 2 knights who knew carpentry and made them help reinforce the towers and cut firing ports. The kobolds did not understand her terms, but after 2 days, even they could tell the wall felt sturdier. Then came the true state project. Venom pig husbandry. Grick had made a 2-foot stone pen with no roof and no proper drainage. Pig manure mixed with venom until the ground bubbled green. The piglets were choking, and the boar had already broken out twice. Leora stared at it for a long time and asked if this was how they raised demonic beasts. Grick admitted it was their first time. She did not insult him, which showed either noble manners or shock. She redesigned everything. A semi-wet mudflat downstream, a small water channel to dilute toxin buildup, 4-foot stone walls with deeper foundations, and a drainage ditch leading excess venom into a settling pond. Then she asked what they fed the pigs. Grick said meat, mushrooms, and bones. Leora gently informed him they were not raising dogs. Venom pigs were omnivores leaning herbivore and needed poisonous herbs from time to time. She wrote a feeding recipe from the demonic beast husbandry manual she had studied as a child. Grick could not read it, so he handed it to a literate kobold and told him to follow it or live with the ogres. Efficient delegation, harsh but clear. By the 3rd day, Brack truly woke. Sivrin had woken earlier but was too weak to move after mana exhaustion and dragon blood backlash. Brack checked whether his contract with me still existed, then checked whether Sivrin was alive. Sivrin asked whether Brack was alive. Brack cursed, then laughed. Neither had died. For them, that counted as a successful meeting. Grick summarized everything. The ogres were defeated, their leader had become a tree. 11 ogres were hauling stones, 6 human knights had signed under Leora, and Leora had signed a master-servant contract with me and was helping the tribe raise pigs. Brack went silent at the last part. Fair reaction. Near-death recovery is one thing. Waking up to foreign policy and pig agriculture is another. On the 4th day, Leora visited Brack and Sivrin. She saw 2 kobold leaders changed by dragon blood, a level 6 warrior and a level 5 warlock. They saw the tiny green contract mark on her forehead. colleagues. Their exchange was short and polite. When she left, she mentally labeled them one strong kobold and one smart kobold. On the 7th day, Leora and the 6 knights were ready to leave. Before she went, I cast a sound barrier and gave her a bead made from 1 drop of emerald green dragon blood sealed in a thin shell. If she met trouble she could not solve, she was to swallow it. No matter what happened, staying alive came first. If her life was gone, everything was gone. She saluted, turned, and walked into the forest with the 6 knights following behind her. Brack asked if she would return. I said I did not know, but next time she did, everything would be different. After that, I finally got a few days of actual dragon life. I slept on Rock Hill, checked my beloved venom pigs at noon, patrolled the mines and mushroom forest in the afternoon, and watched ogre prisoners haul stones under kobold whips. The new pig pen worked. The boar rooted in the mud, the sows slept under a canopy, and the piglets had already doubled in size while fighting over food. A kobold guard sat on the wall with a wooden stick and the expression of someone guarding a national treasury. Good, he understood the assignment. 5 or 6 peaceful days later, the wounded returned to work. The wall breaches were filled. The gate had new iron fittings. The watchtowers were reinforced, and the firing ports beside the gate made sentries feel twice as secure. That was when I summoned the tribe's high-ranking members to Rock Hill. Brack and Sivrin stood in front. Grick stood beside them. Behind them stood Var, the only one of the original 15 surrendered gnolls who had reached rank 4 and survived. He was tense, understandably. For 3 years, gnolls had done the dirtiest and hardest work. Meetings were for kobolds. First, I told him the gnolls had fought well. They had opened the ogre's flank and bitten through the rear. Without them, Brack's shield wall would have broken. So from now on, gnolls would have the same status as kobolds in the Abundance tribe. Same food, same living conditions, same share of spoils. Var froze, then knelt with 1 claw pressed to his chest. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. 3 years ago, he had been a prisoner. Now he was the official commander of the tribe's gnolls. Second, the harshest labor would move to the ogre prisoners. They were huge, strong, and 1 ogre was worth dozens of kobolds. Not using them would be wasteful. Brack and Sivrin approved immediately. The ogres had killed too many of their warriors. Making them carry stones was mercy with a schedule. Then I asked Sivrin for the tribe's population. A little over 800 kobolds, over 100 gnolls, and 11 ogre prisoners, with more stray kobolds and gnolls arriving after the ogre battle. Total population was approaching 1,500. The problem was food. Mushroom yield could not keep up. Hunting parties went out daily, but the outer forest had limited prey. Human merchants from the south came only about once a year. The other possible food source was the half-elf settlements to the east, who sometimes traded food for iron ore and dried mushrooms, but never let monsters inside their stockades. Half-elves? My bloodline remembrance described them as human-elf descendants treated like serfs by the Elven Empire. No property rights, no advanced magic, no officer positions, generations trapped in plantations and mines. The useful part was not their tragic history. It was farming. Sivrin explained that a half-elf hero named Kerlan had led a rebellion about 1,000 years ago and brought many half-elves east toward Sunset Forest. After his death, they scattered into small settlements. The largest nearby was Jirla, around 600 people. They were poor but civilized. They knew crops, livestock, irrigation, and stable food production. They were also terrified of monsters, and green dragons were especially bad news for anyone with elven blood. So brute force was the wrong tool. I told Brack and Sivrin I would think of a food solution. That evening, I flew east and found the half-elf settlements. 5 villages lay along a stream, surrounded by neat fields and irrigation ditches so orderly they made our mushroom plots look personally insulted. The largest settlement had log walls with stone foundations, more like a miniature human town than a monster camp. I did not descend. I circled from far away, memorized the layout, and returned. Food was a long-term problem. Long-term problems needed long-term methods. Half-elves were not ogres. You could not turn their leader into landscaping and call it diplomacy. Meanwhile, in Jirla settlement, their leader Illyra was having a terrible night. Illyra was a level 13 ranger, strong enough to suppress most outer forest threats. A green dragon was not most threats. Representatives from the 5 settlements gathered in her wooden hall. A gray-haired elder confirmed the report. A green dragon lived in the kobold tribe less than half a day away and had been seen circling over the eastern forest. Silence filled the room. More than 1,000 half-elves lived nearby. To a green dragon, that could sound less like neighbors and more like dinner planning. Some wanted to run, others knew there was nowhere to run. East lay the Jaya Duchy, and no one knew whether humans would accept desperate half-elves. Alira stopped the argument. Generations had died to build their fields, orchards, and walls. Her grandmother died opening the land. Her father died in the forest outside the stockade. Now it was her turn to protect it. She ordered a scout envoy sent in the morning. First, they would learn the dragon's attitude. Until then, no one would act rashly. The envoy volunteered himself. Neris, Alira's younger brother and a rank 9 ranger, came to my stronghold with 6 half-elf warriors behind him. They wore the best gear Jirla could offer: tanned leather armor, iron swords, and short bows. Presentable, yes, enough to make them less terrified of entering a green dragon's territory. Not even close. Neris shouted up to the wall, introducing himself as a representative of Jirla settlement, sent by Alira to pay respects to the master of this place. A kobold sentinel vanished. About a quarter of an hour later, Brack opened the gate. Neris had seen kobolds before. Weak, fearful, forgettable. Brack was none of those. He was nearly twice the size of a normal kobold, rank 6, and carried a pressure far beyond his level because of dragon blood. Neris followed him inside and saw kobold miners running with iron pickaxes, gnolls marching in formation, and chained ogres hauling stones under whips. This did not look like a lair. It looked like a military camp. From Rock Hill, I saw the 7 half-elves approach. 6 rank 3s, 1 rank 9, and a carved wooden box. I had planned to release a little dragon's might first, just enough to make negotiations easier. Then Neris opened the box. Several hundred gold coins gleamed inside, with rubies and sapphires scattered on top. My half-raised claw froze. Dragon's might cancelled. Aggression paused. Customer service mode activated. A vine slid down the rock wall, coiled around the box, and lifted it to me. I pushed through the coins, held a ruby to the sunlight, admired its purity, then swallowed the entire box in one gulp. Only then did I look down at Neris. The half-elves certainly knew how to read the room. Neris kept his face respectful. He introduced himself as Alira's younger brother and called her the Verdant Shadow Archer, a title earned from monsters and merchants. A rank 13 ranger on the forest edge was a strength declaration, and sending her own brother with several years of settlement savings was a very serious gesture. As for the part where he claimed they had long admired my mighty reputation, please, I had been in this forest 4 years and slept through 3 of them. My reputation was mostly 2 laps in the sky, and their anxiety doing creative writing. But I did not expose him. One does not slap a smiling person, especially when the smiling person brings gold. I accepted their goodwill and told Neris to inform Alira that I treated friendly neighbors with courtesy, and hoped both sides could maintain that goodwill. Then I ordered Brack to arrange a good guest room and not neglect them. They were guests of the tribe. Once Neris left the Rock Hill area, his back was soaked in sweat. A younger warrior whispered that his legs were shaking. Neris looked down. They were. He told the warrior to shut up. Shaking in front of a dragon was not shameful. Getting back alive was enough. I watched the half-elves disappear into the stronghold and smiled. They really knew how to submit to circumstances. Far away on Jirla Settlement's wall, Alira stood in the same place as the night before, staring toward the western forest while a worn bowstring twisted again and again around her finger. The next morning, Neris woke in the guest room Brack had arranged for him. Guest room was generous. It was a wooden house with straw, cloth, and enough shelter to technically count as hospitality. After walking into a green dragon's stronghold carrying years of settlement savings, exhaustion had done what comfort could not. After breakfast, Neris and his 6 warriors were led back to Rock Hill. Brack, Sivrin, Grick, and Var were already waiting. I had grown a long vine table and several rattan chairs with magic, because if I was going to negotiate, the furniture could at least have spine support. Yesterday was tribute. Today was business. The half-elves had food, money, and technology. They feared me because green dragons loved eating elves, and they were not sure they could kill me. That gave me room to talk, but not room to demand forever with nothing in return. I did not need a one-time protection fee. I needed grain next year, the year after, and every year after that. Stable trade, enough food for my tribe to grow without scraping Sunset Forest clean. So I told Neris directly, his settlement had food and my tribe lacked food. I wanted a stable supply. He had seen the problem already. Nearly 2,000 mouths, including ogres, could not live on hunting and mushrooms forever. But he said the half-elves needed equivalent exchange. Sivrin spread our ledger on the vine table. Dried mushrooms, medium-quality iron ore, demonic beast pelts, and future venom pig venom. Neris pushed it back. They had mushrooms, they had ore, they hunted their own beasts. Pig venom might be useful one day, but the output was too small. Then he asked if we had anything else. Silence settled over the table. Brack's fist clenched, then loosened. So I spoke. There was something else. When I stepped into legend, I would support the half-elves in returning to the Elven Empire and taking back their ancestral land. The entire table froze. Neris looked like his soul had stopped to reread the sentence. Returning to the Elven Empires, taking back the half-elf ancestral land. No one in their settlements had dared say those words seriously for a long time. Caerlan had been dead for 1,000 years. Most living half-elves had been born in this forest. Neris and Alira were his descendants, but their branch had grown weak. In 1,000 years, Alira was the strongest half-elf their region had produced. And now, a green dragon had put their forbidden dream on the table like a trade item. I knew exactly what I was saying. Legends were not cabbages, but I was a dragon. If I survived long enough, touching legend was natural. And with my growth rate, becoming a legendary dragon was not fantasy. It was the likely future, as long as nobody turned me into an inspiring corpse first. Neris asked if I was serious. I told him to ask the real questions. He steadied himself. Clan records said 5-colored dragons usually only reached semi-legend at the old dragon stage. Only exceptional dragons entered legend at adulthood or earlier. How could I be certain I would become one? And even if I did, that might be 100 years later. How could they ensure I would still keep today's promise? Good, that was the sensible question. The boring question, the question that proved he had not drowned in destiny. I told him I could not guarantee the first part, just as he could not guarantee Alira would still hold the settlement next year. Half-elves had survived 1,000 years without guarantees. They survived by gambling. Their ancestors gambled on Caerlan and won enough freedom to flee. Now they could gamble that I would become a legend and help them return. For the second part, I offered insurance. Alira could sign a dragonline conversion contract with me. Her life would bind to mine. If I was alive 100 years later, she would still live as my dragonline dependent. As long as she remained my subordinate within my ability, I would fulfill the promise. That was my bottom lines. Neris went still. Dragonline conversion meant strength, dragon blood, longer life, and a soul forever tied to the contracting dragon. If the dragon lived, the dependent could never betray it. In other words, I was asking them to hand me the lifeline of their entire half-elf branch. Neris stood. No, absolutely not. Food could be negotiated, he said, but dragonline conversion was not a trade clause. I was not asking for grain. I was asking for their future. Fair, also exactly the point. I asked whether their branch had seen any real hope in 1,000 years. Instead of slowly fading until some passing powerhouse destroyed them by accident, why not gamble on whether I would help them after becoming a legend? He refused again, so I raised my body and looked down at him. This was not his decision to make. He was an envoy, not the one who could decide the fate of his people. Since he could not decide, I would go to someone who could. Neris opened his mouth, then closed it. Because I was right. The final decision belonged to Alira. I told Brack and Sivrin to treat the envoy well, then spread my wings and flew east. Neris watched me shrink into a green dot on the horizon, then sat back down and buried his face in his hands. His no had been loud, but even he could not stop thinking about what dragonline conversion meant. He had seen Brack, a level 6 kobold whose pressure felt like a level 10 demonic beast. What would Alira become if dragon blood transformed her? That thought was dangerous because it was hope wearing teeth. Alira had been standing on Jirla Settlement's watchtower for almost 2 days. Since Neris left, she had only come down for food, sleep, and survival. By travel time, he should have returned by noon if talks went well. The sun was already slanting west. No shadow on the road. Below, children played near the fields, the blacksmith's hammer rang, and elders turned wheat on the thrashing floor. Alira watched it all and knew why they had not chosen to fight me already. Even if they somehow killed a dragon, losing their combat strength would leave the settlement doomed. Then her ears twitched. Something was coming from the sky. A sentry pointed west. An emerald-green shadow grew beneath the clouds. The settlement erupted into chaos. Children were dragged indoors. Wheat baskets were abandoned. Sentries raised bows but did not draw, because nobody wanted to be the person who shot at a dragon, failed to kill it, and gave it a lifelong grudge with their address attached. I hovered above Jirla Settlement and told them to bring out their leader. Alira stepped forward on the wall in deep green ranger armor, old cloak over her shoulders, blonde hair tied back, no fear on her face. She asked why I had come and where her brother was. She did not ask what I had done to him. Smart, if he was safe, it showed weakness. If he was dead, it helped nothing. I told her Neris was alive and being treated as a guest. I had come because he could not decide the fate of their half-elf branch. Could she? She said if I wanted the strongest among them, yes. So I repeated the offer where everyone could hear it. Grain trade, dragon line conversion, my promise after reaching legend. Return to the Elven Empire. Take back the half-elf ancestral land. Every word fell across the settlement. Silence, then the settlement split without moving. The young shouted that this land was their home. They had been born here, lived here, buried family here. They did not want to chase a homeland they had never seen. The elders spoke of return. Their parents and grandparents had died facing west, still dreaming of land stolen from half-elves 1,000 years ago. The middle-aged ones said little, trapped between the home under their feet and the root they had inherited through stories. Alira did not silence them. She let the argument reveal the truths. The word return had waited too long. She asked for half a day to deliberate. I landed on an old tree outside the stockade and agreed. Inside the council hall, beneath Caerlan's faded flag and old bow, Alira met the three voices of the settlement. Elder Arvin wanted to gamble. Their people had not produced a single legend in 1,000 years. If I was willing to bind my promise by contract in the name of the gods, preferably witnessed by the metallic dragon god, then my word could be made useful. Mael opposed it. A green dragon's promise was poison wrapped in gold. Besides, this forest was home. No one alive had seen the ancestral land. Why risk everything for a place that might exist only in grief? Dalen stood between them. Hope mattered, risk mattered, but the biggest question was talent. If I was only an ordinary green dragon, then even adulthood would not be enough against the Elven Empire. They were not just gambling on my honesty. They were gambling on my potential. Alira listened, then gave her answer. She would fight me. If she defeated or killed me, the threat would disappear and they would stay here forever. If she fought with all her strength and still lost to me while I was only a young dragon, then my talent would be proven. She would sign the contract and undergo dragon vein transformation. If we both ended heavily injured but I could still move, they would surrender too. A dragon who could cross multiple tiers and fight a rank 13 title ranger to that result had only two futures for them: kill it or stand with it. No third path. The council accepted. Alira walked out beyond the gate with her bow in hand. I glided down from the old tree and landed 20 paces away. She said we would fight. If I won, the half-elves would submit. If I lost, I would leave, and both sides would stop all aggression and interaction. If she signed dragon vein transformation, an additional contract had to be witnessed by the metallic dragon god, guaranteeing that after I stepped into legend, I would help their clan return to their ancestral land. Then she asked if I dared sign. I liked her directness. I agreed. She drew her bow. I spread my wings. The duel began. Her first arrow came before I even saw her draw. I dodged and it grazed my wing. Immediate conclusion: standing close to Alira was a terrible investment. I rose fast. She vanished beneath the trees and fired again. The arrow scraped my abdomen scales, leaving a white mark. Even a test shot from a level 13 ranger carried real weight. My last trace of contempt left the field. I circled above and released breath attack. Alira dashed away before it landed. Grass withered, sprouted, and rotted in the blast trail. She looked back, saw the smoking scar, and realized my breath was far stronger than ancient records said a green dragon wormling should be. I sprayed again, then again. She dodged with feather-light step, but every movement burned stamina. I had air superiority. I chose timing and angle. She only reacted. The longer this continued, the worse her odds became. So she stopped running, stood in the clearing, and drew her bow to the limit. Emerald light wrapped the arrowheads. She could only fire that kind of arrow twice a day. If two did not end the battle, she would lose. The first emerald arrow cut upward. I twisted aside, and it sliced the membrane near my left wing root, drawing dragon blood. That was one. I had to suppress her before the second. I folded my wings and dove. My hind claws came down. Alira drew her short sword, and steel met dragon claw with sparks. Her arm went numb, but she redirected enough force to survive. I swept my tail. She flipped over it and cut a shallow slit between my tail scales. Close combat gave me no advantage. She was too flexible, so I climbed again and cast vines from the ground. She dodged the first, then roots and vines attacked together, disrupting her footwork for one beat. That beat was enough. My breath attack arrived. Alira rolled away, but the edge blackened her clothes. She knelt, breathing hard, stamina nearly gone. Then she stood and drew the bow one final time. All her remaining magic poured into the arrow. The bow trembled. The wind itself seemed to lean toward the shot. This was the strongest arrow she had ever fired, and I could not dodge it. The arrow pierced my wing membrane with a sharp tear. Dragon blood poured out. Pain hit hard, and I lost balance, forcing myself down with my left wing drooping and bleeding. Alira knelt too, right hand trembling. She had hit me, then green light gathered around the wound. Tiny specks sank into the torn membrane. Flesh reconnected, blood vessels joined, muscle fibers knitted neatly together. In a few seconds, the hole closed completely. All my injuries vanished. Alira stared. Ancient texts did not say green dragons regenerated like that, because normal green dragons do not. She was facing a green dragon with the power of abundance stitched into his soul, which was rude, unfair, and extremely useful. I moved my healed wing and looked at her. Alira released her bow and short sword. "You win." She pressed her right hand to her chest and gave the half-elf submission salute. According to the agreement, the settlement would join my command. Dragon vein transformation, grain trade, the contract, all of it would follow my conditions. After all that effort, I had gained another powerful subordinate. I told her to bring her people tomorrow morning to sign the contract officially, then turned back toward the Abundance tribe. On the wall, Elder Arvin tapped his cane and said one thing was now certain. This dragon was definitely not an ordinary green dragon. Mael stayed silent for a moment, then admitted the elder might be right. The stockade gate closed behind Alira. Torches lit along the wall. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Early the next morning, Alira led the half-elves to Rock Hill. Behind her came the leaders of the other 4 settlements. Mael, Arvin, Dalen, and more than 100 half-elf warriors escorting dozens of carts. Most were loaded with grains, enough grain to feed 2,000 mouths for half a year. One cart carried something even more beautiful, gold coins and gemstones. The half-elves had learned my love language quickly. At the Abundance tribe's gate, Brack and Sivrin waited with Grick and Var behind them. 2 neat rows of kobold warriors lined the entrance, iron spears polished bright enough to reflect faces. Alira announced that the half-elf settlements had come to fulfill the appointment. Brack and Sivrin opened the way. Neris had barely slept in the guest room, spending the night replaying every possible disaster. When Mael dragged him out and he saw Alira alive, relief hit him first. Then Mael told him they had lost. Alira had fought with everything she had, but the dragon was too powerful. Before Neris could drown in guilt, Mael added what the elders had found in old settlement records. Aberrant dragons. Rare mutants among dragonkind, 1 in 10,000, completely different from normal dragons. Even weaker ones usually reached legend as adults. Stronger ones could become demigods or worse. So Alira had not simply lost a duel. She had found the chance their bloodline had waited 1,000 years for. Wild consolation, yes, but not wrong. When the procession climbed Rock Hill, the top no longer looked like bare stone. I had grown it into a green palace of vines and trees. Branches arched into a dome. Leaves filtered morning light into bright beams, moss softened the floor, and at the center stood a living dragon throne grown from intertwined vines. Subtle, no, effective, absolutely. I coiled on the throne beneath the sunlight. Alira stepped into the center beam, removed her bow, placed it by her feet, and knelt on one knee. The settlement leaders knelt with her. The warriors pushed the grain and treasure carts to the dome's edge and saluted. As a descendant of Kerlan and representative of the 5 half-elf settlements of Sunset Forest, Alira swore allegiance. From that day forward, their fates rested beneath my dragon claws. My enemies were their enemies. My will was their direction. She presented the inventory. Grain, gold coins, gemstones, dozens of food carts, and 1 treasure cart. Good oath, better invoice. Then came her dragon blood transformation. I pierced the scales on my chest and gathered 1 drop of emerald blood at my claw tip. Alira stood beneath the throne and opened her mouth. The blood dropped in. Heat surged through her body. Her knees almost gave way. Pain pushed from her shoulder blades as if something were forcing its way out of bone. Then emerald dragon wings spread from her back. Her pupils lengthened into slits, fading from blue to light green. New scales appeared on the backs of her hands, catching the sunlight. In less than a dozen seconds, Alira had become a dragon bloodline ranger. She moved her shoulders, stretched her wings, and said she felt like she could defeat 2 or 3 of her former self. Her vitality had strengthened, and her lifespan had clearly increased. A level 13 Dragonblood Ranger was now one of the strongest pieces on my board. Below the steps, Neris stared at her wings. Alira asked if they were ugly. He shook his head, though what really weighed on him was weakness. If he had been stronger, maybe she would not have needed to choose this path. Strength is cruel like that. It does not care about regrets. I looked down from the dome's edge at kobolds, gnolls, ogres, and half-elves gathered together without war breaking out. Wonderful scene. The ogres were still chained laborers, yes, but they had attacked my wall and killed my people. Mistakes have invoices. The gnolls had earned status after 3 years and one major battle. The half-elves brought grain, technology treasure, and a level 13 hero unit. That was not favoritism. That was capital-backed entry. That evening, the Abundance tribe lit the largest bonfire since its founding. I ordered every race's rations tripled for the celebration. Even the ogres in the mines and dungeons received double meat and mushroom soup. At first, they stared at the extra food like it might be a punishment. A moment later, they were chewing the bones to pieces. Across heaven and earth, food remains the most persuasive policy. Kobolds and gnolls fought over roasted meat. Half-elves tried to keep their civilized airs until Grick shoved hot demonic beast meat into their hands and dignity lost to seasoning. Mushroom wine made one gnoll collapse and howl, which made the nearby half-elves laugh until they forgot to be nervous. For once, everyone could eat until full. On Rock Hill, the leaders held a quieter banquet beneath the Vine Dome. Brack spoke first. Kobolds would keep mining, minerals, mushrooms, and the Master's personal guard. He and Sivrin had followed me longest, and the kobolds would never give up that trusted position. Var said gnolls would handle external warfare, flanking, pursuit, patrols, and hunting. They knew the outer forest best. Alira said half-elves would handle ranged combat, scouts, logistics, farming, and stable food production. If the tribe expanded, half-elf farms and orchards would keep the supply lines alive. Grick counted on his fingers and summarized it perfectly. Kobolds mine, gnolls fight, half-elves farm and shoot arrows. Ogres do hard labor. Bureaucracy, translated for people who solve most problems with spears. Halfway through the banquet, I walked to Var. He immediately stood. I told him it was time for the dragon blood he had earned. The kobold leaders were my vassals. The half-elf leader was my vassal. If the gnoll leader stayed outside that structure, the tribe would crack later. Every major race needed a leader tied directly to me. Var knelt and swallowed the drop of emerald dragon blood without hesitation. His transformation was rougher than Alira's. Emerald scales pushed through his fur, his body grew larger, and his pupils turned vertical. When he rose, he had become a level 6 dragon bloodline gnoll. He pressed one claw to his chest. Master. With that, the structure of the Abundance tribe was officially set. Alira, level 13 dragon bloodline ranger. Brack, level 6 dragon bloodline warrior. Sivrin, level 5 dragon bloodline warlock. Var, level 6 dragon bloodline gnoll. And far away in the human world, Leora was also tied to me by contract. My network now covered kobolds, gnolls, half-elves, and humans. The tribe had become more than a monster camp. It had become a real power. 3 days after the banquet, I called Alira to Rock Hill and gave the next orders. She would return to Jirla settlement with her elite subordinates. The settlements would continue farming, training, and expanding food production as before. Headquarters only needed a few dozen elite half-elf warriors as mobile support. If trouble came, I could call her through the contract. Then I called Sivrin and Var forward. Kobolds and gnolls would leave elites at headquarters and take the rest outward. Control territory, occupy resource points, expand with the population. If they met trouble they could not solve, they would contact Alira first. If Alira could not solve it, they would contact me. Brack took the east, where several kobold tribes controlled mine caves. Var took the west, where wild Tier 2 demonic beast hunting grounds needed clearing. The ogres would remain at headquarters for hard labor. Grick would stay behind to manage daily operations and venom pig breeding. Naturally, Grick had been listening from the stairs. He promised to guard the pig pen so seriously that if he failed after a few years, he would die to make amends. I told him that was unnecessary. Killing your pig manager is terrible succession planning. Then I told them all that I would soon enter deep slumber again. Before I woke, they would need to handle the tribe themselves. For the next 2 months, the Abundance tribe shifted fully into development. Alira returned to the half-elf settlements, expanded farmland, trained archers, and reported progress through the contract. At first I listened. Then the reports became drainage channels, food estimates, and training rotations. So I began closing my eyes to preserve my will to live. Brack led 300 kobold warriors and miners east to abandoned mine tunnels. The ore was deeper and better than Rock Hill's open pit mine. Sivrin reinforced collapsing passages with mud to stone and mapped the interior. Var led gnoll hunters west. The Tier 2 beasts there were more troublesome than expected, especially a herd of ironskin badgers that beat several hunters so badly they looked like they had lost an argument with the ground. Var split the herd with flanking tactics, drove the largest group away and marked the forest as Knoll territory. Grick patrolled walls, mines, and pigpens every day. After the banquet gave the ogres the first satisfying meal of their lives, some even started humming while hauling stones. Imagine attacking a tribe, losing, getting chained to construction labor, then realizing 3 meals and no battlefield might not be the worst deal. Late one night, I contacted Leora through our soul contract. Across Sunset Forest and the Jaya Duchy border, her voice answered from the middle of a civil war. 2/3 of the forest earldom's vassals were already under control. After the truth about the old guard captain's murder spread, many knight families shifted to her side. The 6 contracted knights and their families provided testimony, and a secret order tied to Merk became powerful evidence. Her stepmother had retreated into the count's mansion with a mercenary corps, but no great master-level powerhouses. Victory was only a matter of time. The Northern Earl tried to send a diplomatic mission to mediate, which really meant looting a burning house. Leora made the envoy wait 3 days, then politely told him the Forest Earldom civil war did not need outsiders meddling. Polite phrasing, steel spine. She planned to become count officially, then form an alliance with the Abundance tribe. The problem was that a tribe of kobolds and gnolls would be hard for human nobles to accept. I told her half-elves had joined us, and would serve as the main diplomatic support when the alliance was signed. That calmed her. I reminded her to keep the dragon blood bead I had given her. It could save her life. She understood, said she had to return to her damned vassal meetings, and wished me sweet dreams. I told her not to die. The connection cut. Everything was moving. Leora's civil war was nearly decided. Illyra developed the rear. Brackenvar expanded the perimeter. Resources and territory kept growing. A capable group of subordinates is a beautiful thing. It means the dragon can sleep while everyone else develops the spreadsheet. At dusk 2 months later, my next deep slumber arrived. I sent orders to every leader. If external threats appeared, handle them if possible. If not, avoid the sharp edge and wait until I woke. Then I sealed the vine palace around me. Inside the hall were the resources the tribe had gathered. Gold coins, magic gems, demonic beast crystal cores, black oil, precious metals, and other high-energy materials. For dragons, they were growth catalysts. Black oil flowed into my mouth. Gems cracked between my teeth. Gold coins hissed in my stomach acid as they broke down into pure energy. The power of abundance circulated through my body, weaving with my dragon bloodline to trap every shred of power. Consciousness sank. In the dark, my scales thickened, wing membranes toughened, bones lengthened, and horns slowly rose from my skull. When the vines opened again, what walked out would be a true dragon with a place in this world. Outside, the tribe kept operating. In the first month of my slumber, Brack pushed east. His target was the eastern mine caves. Their fine iron ore reserves were several times richer than headquarters, but several kobold tribes occupied the entrances. Without clearing them, large-scale mining was impossible. The first small tribe surrendered immediately when its rank 4 chieftain saw Brack's formation. The second resisted. Its rank 5 chieftain got split in half by 1 axe blow, and the rest were incorporated. After that, Brack advanced faster than expected. Small tribes of 200 or 300 could not stand against iron-equipped shield soldiers supported by half-elf archers. In less than a month, his kobolds grew from 800 to more than 1,500. But real combat strength still belonged to the original 800 blade and shield soldiers and 100 half-elf longbowmen. The 700 new auxiliaries were prisoners turned into cannon fodder with sharpened sticks and battlefield scrap. Sivrin's rule was simple. Want to become a regular soldier? Pay with blood. Only those who killed enemies and survived could join the blade and shield ranks. Deserters carried news farther east, and the remaining tribes panicked. Alone, none could resist Brack, so they chose a powerful kobold tribe as their alliance leader. Its chieftain was a red-scaled kobold awakened with red dragon bloodline. I will call him Vareth. Vareth ruled from an abandoned dwarven mine, sitting on a throne modified from an old minecart and inlaid with rough rubies. He was twice the size of a normal kobold, could breathe fire, enchant his claws with flame, and had reached rank 8 at just over 20. For a kobold, that was genius-level talent. Unfortunately, it also gave him the confidence of someone sprinting toward a historical example. He mocked the small chieftains for losing to Brack, called Brack a juvenile green dragon's lackey, and declared that a mere green dragon could not compare to him, a kobold with red dragon bloodline. My guy, he had 2,000 kobolds and decided that meant he could provoke a juvenile green dragon. That is not ambition. That is a funeral wearing a crown. Vareth raised a flaming claw and declared that every small tribe now belonged to him. Their soldiers, mines, and lives were his. Then an attendant slipped and tapped a basin against the stone floor. Vareth killed him instantly with 1 flaming claw. The hall went silent. He sat back down and announced his rules. obey and live, disobey and burn. He did not like the title Alliance Leader. From now on, they would call him the Flame King, the King of Kobolds. One chieftain knelt, then another. Soon all of them knelt, while Vareth's laughter echoed through the mine hall. That night, Brack received the report from a scout who had infiltrated Vareth's supply auxiliaries and seen the murdered attendant thrown into a pit. Brack repeated the title, King of Kobolds. Then he found it ridiculous. Sivrin studied the map and said Vareth could not control his allies. The 6 small tribes had gone to him because Brack scared them, not because they truly submitted. Only Vareth's core 1,000 would really fight for him, and their weapons could not compare to abundant steel. The advantage was theirs. Before the main fight, Sivrin suggested sending auxiliaries to test them. Survivors could become regulars. By then, Brack had risen to rank 7 and Sivrin to rank 6 after several campaigns. With 800 shield soldiers, 100 half-elf archers, and 700 auxiliaries, they had no reason to lose to frightened tribes stapled together by a violent idiot. If they won, the entire East would belong to abundance. Brack ordered the army to set out. 1,600 marched east. By noon the next day, Brack's army stood outside Vareth's stronghold. 800 shield-bearers formed a phalanx. 100 half-elf archers waited behind them. 700 auxiliaries spread along both sides. The formation was not perfect, but to a sentry who had never seen discipline, it looked terrifying. Vareth heard the report while eating roasted meat, laughed that 1,600 dared attack his 2,000, and marched out. The gates opened. More than 2,000 kobolds poured from the stone walls. From far away, the number looked impressive. Up close, the problems were obvious. Weapons were a mess. Even Vareth's core force used many stone weapons. The 6 small tribes moved separately and obeyed no common rhythm. Vareth looked at the chaos and nodded in satisfaction. More people meant stronger. Chaos was aura. Military theory, brought to you by a man whose best idea was big crowd go forward. Brack stood at the front of the phalanx with his iron axe. Sivrin asked if they called that an army. Brack called it rabble and sent the auxiliaries first. 700 prisoner auxiliaries charged with sharpened sticks and broken blades. They knew the math: run back and die for certain, charge forward and maybe live. Survival meant promotion into the regular army. Vareth mocked them as beggars and forced 3 small tribe leaders to send their own men forward. Refuse now, die now, lose later, die later. So they charged too. More than 1,400 kobolds collided in open ground. No formation, no tactics, just desperate beginners killing each other with real blood. The auxiliaries fought because promotion waited on the other side. The opposing tribes fought because Vareth terrified them. For a while, the 2 piles of nervous amateurs fought to a draw. Brack watched long enough to measure the enemy, then ordered the auxiliaries to retreat and the flanks to circle back. Of the 700 who charged, a little over 300 returned, many wounded. But the survivors were not afraid. They were happy. They had survived the test. Promotion was coming. Apparently nothing says career advancement like living through a battlefield with a stick. Then Brack ordered the main force forward. The shield-bearers advanced in step. Half-elf archers followed with bowstrings half-drawn. Vareth grew excited. His core 1,000 stood behind him, and he believed this was where his strength would crush Brack. He leapt down from the gate and ordered everyone to charge. The 1,000+ kobolds surged forward. Then they hit the shield wall. The first row of shield bearers chopped. Kobolds fell in rows. Those behind tripped over bodies and were trampled by the crowd. Half-elf arrows swept over the shields, dropping bold warriors and chieftains before they could reach the line. Several small tribe leaders saw the disaster and pulled their people back. They had never truly followed Vareth, and dying for the self-proclaimed Flame King was not in their personal development plan. The moment they retreated, the shield-bearers tore the gap open. 800 shield soldiers rolled forward like a moving wall, crushing through the kobolds who had just been shouting Flame King. Vareth saw his allies fleeing, his vanguard routing, and his 2,000-strong army turning into a joke. He did not retreat. The arrogance and fury of the red dragon bloodline burned away his reason. His eyes turned red. He dropped onto all fours and charged at Brack like a beast. Every step left smoking marks in the ground. Flames poured from his mouth and wrapped around his claws. He roared Brack's name and rushed into range. Brack stood at the front of the phalanx and raised his iron axe. The moment Vareth entered striking distance, Brack swung down. Brack's axe came down, and Vareth caught it with flame-wrapped claws. Sparks exploded between them. Fire poured from Vareth's fingers and blasted heat into Brack's face. Axe and claws locked together, close enough for Brack to see his reflection in those red vertical pupils. Vareth mocked him as a green dragon's lackey. Brack did not answer. He pressed harder. The axe sank lower. Vareth grunted, then swept his other claw toward Brack's waist. Brack twisted aside, but the flame scraped his leather armor black before both of them bounced apart. First exchange, nobody won. That was already a problem. The main battlefield was only dozens of steps away, and Brack's shield wall was crushing Veyrath's army forward. If their duel crashed into the formation, Brack's own line could break. Veyrath did not care. His army was already collapsing. Brack cared, so he dragged his axe and ran toward the western flank. Veyrath instantly shouted that he was running, because apparently the man losing the war still had time for commentary. Then he dropped onto all fours and chased like a beast. Brack stopped in an open space away from the main fight. Veyrath knew he had been led there on purpose, but the red dragon bloodline burning inside him had narrowed his world to one thought. Kill Brack, prove he was the strongest kobold in the region. That was the whole operating system. Veyrath pounced. Flame-coated claws slashed for Brack's head. Brack blocked, used the rebound to counter, and cut into Veyrath's left shoulder. Red scales blocked the worst of it, but blood still seeped out. Veyrath answered by tearing a deep gash along Brack's ribs. Fire clung to the wound. Then Veyron's dragon blood started working. Emerald scales glowed around the injury. Burned flesh peeled away, and new tissue grew visibly beneath it. Veyrath's pupils shrank. He had just met the worst kind of opponent. Someone who takes your best hit, heals in front of you, and makes you realize the receipt is still coming. He demanded to know what that power was. Brack told him a stupid red-scaled kobold would not understand the power of his lord. Against Veyrath's temper, one sentence was crowd control. Veyrath roared and attacked again. Axe and burning claws crashed over the slag ground. Veyrath fought like his personality. Frantic, vicious, all offense, no defense. Brack fought like a commander. Block, sidestep, bleed off force, wait for the opening. When Veyrath overcommitted, Brack swept the axe upward and cut deep into the soft flank beneath his armpit, where red scales did not protect him. Veyrath screamed and burned his own wound shut with his claws. That is a battlefield solution in the same way falling downstairs is a travel plan. Brack asked if that was all the Flame King had. Veyrath lost it. He opened his mouth and released a flame breath attack. It was nowhere near a real red dragon's breath, but for a rank 8 kobold, it was terrifying. The orange fire pillar swept across the ground. Brack had no room to dodge, so he planted his axe in front of him and took it head-on. When the fire faded, Brack was still standing. Charred, hurt, still healing. Veyrath saw that one more heavy attack might finish him and dropped onto all fours to pounce. Then his limbs sank into mud. The ground beneath him had become a half-foot-deep quagmire. His claws stuck. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. Sivrin stepped out with his staff raised. Quagmire spell. Veyrath shouted that 2 against 1 was unfair. Sivrin looked at him like he had watched someone file a complaint with the battlefield manager, then expanded the mud and added vines. Brack walked forward barely steady and told Veyrath the truth. They were kobolds. They were monsters. Nobody here was playing by noble duel rules. Veyrath tried to breathe fire, but the mud dragged his body sideways and the flame shot over Brack's head. Brack used the opening, rushed in, and brought the axe down into Veyrath's left side, splitting into his collarbone. Veyrath screamed. Fire burst around him, burning the vines away, but Sivrin's second spell landed before he could recover. Slow, his movements dragged. Every struggle took twice the effort. The quagmire dried into cracked mud around him. On the main battlefield, his army was already finished. The shield wall had crushed through the front, and half-elf arrows kept dropping anything dangerous enough to matter. Veyrath looked up at Brack. The arrogance was gone, but refusal still burned in his eyes. Why had he lost? He had awakened red dragon bloodline by himself, while Brack had gained dragon blood by serving a dragon. Why was he weaker? He refused to accept it. Brack raised the axe and gave him the only answer that mattered. Because his master was different. Veyron Oskeldrun was destined to become the strongest dragon in the world. Then the axe fell. The Flame King died half-kneeling in cracked mud, and the flames around his body went out completely. Brack pulled the axe free and walked away. Sivrin looked back once, sent a fireball into the corpse and burned Veyrath to ash. The kobold who called himself the Flame King disappeared into flame. The universe does enjoy signing its jokes in permanent ink. Before the battlefield smoke had cleared, Veyrath's flag came down and the Abundance banner rose over the mine. But victory was expensive. Of the 800 veteran shield soldiers, only 600 could regroup, and half were injured. The half-elf archers had no deaths, but Brack knew exactly what had been spent. 200 veteran kobolds were gone. The mines were secure. The eastern border was secure. The half-elf settlements behind them were safer. In cold military numbers, the trade was worth it. But those soldiers were not numbers to Brack. They were brothers, family, and friends. Sivrin handled the next step before grief could freeze the army. The 300 surviving auxiliary kobolds would be promoted into shield soldiers. Battlefield loot and rush-forged weapons from headquarters would fill the gaps. Promotion by surviving the meat grinder. Horrible system, effective system. Then pursuit teams returned with prisoners. 4 small tribe leaders, dozens of senior followers, and over 1,000 ordinary captives from Verath's remnants and the surrounding tribes. One leader tried to flatter Brack by calling him the king of kobolds. Wrong sentence, wrong room, wrong axe owner. Brack's hand moved to the axe hilt, and the leader's smile froze. Brack made the line clear. His master, the Abundance Dragon, had not claimed kingship. Varen was a true dragon, and even he had not called himself king. What right did Brack, a servant, have to accept that title? Mention it again, and the axe would not recognize faces. Every leader nodded like fear had personally sponsored their necks. Brack spared the useful leaders for absorption. The rest of the high-ranking kobolds would be sent west to help Var's expansion. Ordinary prisoners became auxiliary soldiers under the same rule as before. Fight, bleed, kill enemies, survive, and only then earn a place among the shield ranks. By evening, all 7 mines were under Brack's control. The Abundance flag flew over the stone wall, auxiliary teams reinforced the tunnels, and messengers rode back to headquarters with orders for weapons, tools, and food. The prisoners would mine and farm. The Abundance tribe had officially reached the stage where every victory generated a spreadsheet. That night, Brack stood on the wall and looked west along the mineral vein toward headquarters. A month ago, he had marched out with 800 soldiers. Now the entire vein lay beneath his feet. He had done what he promised Varen. Sivrin joined him and warned that until the dwarves delivered new weapons, the mine defense could not relax. Verath was dead, but other hostile forces could still be nearby. Brack gave the next order. Starting tomorrow, they would clear everything within 50 li of the mine. Any armed force not flying the Abundance banner would be removed. With that, the large war in the east ended. Meanwhile, in the forest earldom, heavy rain had been falling for 2 full days. Leora Vale stood inside a military tent and looked toward Forest City, the largest city in the earldom. Her stepmother, Isolde Brant, hid inside with 2,000 mercenaries and city guards, waiting for reinforcements from the Northern Earl. But even if the Northern Earl moved the moment he received her plea, it would take at least 2 months. Leora did not need 2 months. She had legal inheritance, the stronger army, and the city was one hard push away from cracking. Rowan Terran entered the tent. He was the second son of a family that had served House Forest for centuries. Isolde had once buried him at a border outpost because loyal people were inconvenient when stealing a title. The moment Rowan heard Leora had returned to fight for the earldom, he joined her. Now he brought reports. The eastern wall near the river was weak, the mercenaries were concentrated at the west and north gates, and someone at the south gate was already wavering. Captain Garrick arrived with better news. General Oren inside the city guard had sent word that the mercenary deputy commander had named his price. Bastion's head was worth 300 gold coins. Leora approved it. The south gate guards who opened the city would receive extra pay. Mercenaries who surrendered after Bastion died would receive severance and go home. Anyone who kept resisting would be killed. That was not mercy, that was math with a banner on it. 800 cavalrymen were ready. 3,000 infantry waited in the rain. Leora looked toward Forest City and remembered everything that place held. Her forced marriage order, her dead old guard captain's loyalty, and nobles who had toasted her father before kneeling to her stepmother. She told Rowan that within 3 days, she wanted to stand in that city's council hall. Then, because she was still herself, she added that his scone was too hard and needed more honey next time. Rowan froze for 1 second, then saluted her as Lord Count. Inside Forest City, Isolde Brant stood at the Count's mansion window with red wine in hand. Her scouts had reported Leora's army, 3,800 soldiers, including 800 cavalry. Meanwhile, her own mercenaries and city guards were already shaking. Southgate men were wavering. The mercenary deputy was negotiating with the enemy. Then a black-robed figure entered. Isolde knew what he was. An evil cultist, one of the demon-worshipping lunatics banned by every civilized kingdom. She was negotiating with him in the council hall her husband left behind, because every clean option had already died. Her nobles smiled to her face and called her usurper behind her back. Since Leora returned alive, they had been sending messages outward as if Isolde's authority had already expired. Leora could lose and return as long as she lived, because she carried House Forest blood. Isolde could only lose once, so she asked the cultist's price. He lowered his hood, dark red hair, amber eyes between human and reptile, gray-brown skin, fine mesh-like texture along his hands and neck, hardened ears, half-flame demon, half-human. The warning label had learned to walk. His price was territory along the edge of Sunset Forest, about the size of 3 baronies carved out for the cult to manage. Isolde snapped that the forest earldom had not lost an inch of land in hundreds of years. The half-demon reminded her that if Leora won, none of the land would be hers anyway. Ugly, correct? Isolde drank the rest of her wine and agreed. The cultist promised that within 3 days, his lord's grace would make Leora's army rout in terror. Then he left, trailing sulfur behind him. Afterward, Cillian stepped from the shadows. He was a level 11 elite knight, Isolde's old lover, and the man who had returned to her side after the old count died. He had heard enough to know she had just traded 3 baronies to demon cultists. He asked if the cultist was trustworthy. Isolde looked at him and asked what difference it made. They had no other choice. On the first morning after the rain stopped, Leora attacked Forest City. 3,000 infantry advanced from the front and flanks. Siege ladders rose. Then the south gate opened from the inside faster than expected, with a city guard still in uniform waving frantically at her army. That is not betrayal, that is pre-ordered delivery. Rowan blew the cavalry horn, and 800 horsemen charged through the mud toward the open gate. Garrick led the front and ordered the Brandt family flag torn down. On the west wall, Bastian was commanding his mercenaries when his deputy stabbed him through the back of the neck. The deputy wiped the dagger clean and announced that Bastian was dead. Anyone who surrendered would receive triple commission. Anyone who resisted would be shown no mercy. The mercenaries looked at each other. Then they threw down their weapons. Mercenary loyalty has a receipt, and that receipt said 300 gold coins. Everything unfolded exactly as Leora had planned. The cavalry rode through the main street without obstruction. Noble representatives waited at alleyways with House Forest banners, shouting for the Orthodox heir and pretending they had always awaited her return. These were the same people who had bowed in Isolde's hall months earlier. Leora was disgusted behind her visor, but she nodded, thanked them, and promised to summon them later. They did not notice the edge in the word summon. The reckoning could wait. Now she needed the city. At the Count's mansion, more than 200 of Isolde's personal guards stood in fine armor along the outer wall. Isolde waited on the tower in a deep red robe, makeup perfect, with Cillian behind her in silver armor. Leora stopped her horse outside the wall. 800 cavalry blocked the street behind her, while infantry closed the city around the mansion. Isolde smiled down and called her good daughter. She reminded Leora that last time, she had been crying and begging not to be married to the Northern Earl. Then she asked if Leora thought she had already won. Rowan listed her crimes and demanded surrender. Isolde did not even look at him. Her eyes stayed on Leora. Then she smiled wider and said she would teach her one more lesson. Never think you have won for sure. She signaled toward the surrounding streets. A dozen black-robed figures emerged from the shadows. Sulfur spread through the air. Horses snorted. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Cillian drew his sword. He trusted Isolde, but no one else. If the situation turned bad, he was ready to take her away. Then every black-robed cultist raised a hand and drove it into their own chest. Fingers pierced cloth, skin, and breastbone. Their bodies lit up, and they began chanting in the language of demons. The sound was wrong. Every syllable made the body reject it, like the world itself hated the shape of those words. Leora's consciousness shook. Then the emerald mark on her forehead glowed. Varen's contract protected her. Above the Count's mansion, a dazzling magic array appeared. The sky tore open. Scorching air poured out, evaporating rainwater from the stones and heating the street beneath the soldiers' feet. Even Isolde's personal guards began to stir. Everyone felt it. The world itself hated that crack. At the edge of the street, one cultist lifted his robe and screamed toward the sky, begging his lord to show his might and let these ignorant humans witness the greatness of a demon. The demon answered the prayer by appearing and immediately making everyone regret having eyes. Leaves along the street curled yellow. Rainwater on the stones flashed into steam. Heat shredded the vapor into white mist until the whole block turned muggy and hard to breathe. The cavalry horses backed away no matter how hard the soldiers pulled their reins. The horses understood faster than the humans. Something terrifying was coming out. Leora forced down the nausea in her chest and stared at the silhouette forming inside the crack. A flame fiend. She had seen illustrations at the Mage Academy. Flame fiends were native demons of the abyss, a race not inferior to dragons. Adults were at least great master level, and exceptional ones could reach legend. Many abyss layer lords were flame fiends. Creatures like that were not supposed to enter the main plane without special methods. Small problem, a 4-meter-tall city melting problem. The fissure widened and a claw reached out. It had 4 digits, bone spurs at the joints, and magma-like light pulsing through cracks in its skin. The claw gripped the tear and ripped it wider. Then Gorvathar squeezed into the world. Gorv, because nobody has time for the full demon name while the street is cooking. When he touched the ground, stones cracked outward from his feet. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, covered in cracked magma crust with white-hot bone spurs, jagged spikes down his back, and a head somewhere between bull and human. Curved horns framed his skull like closing sickles. He had no lips, so every breath exposed fangs and dark red sparks. He looked around, inhaled, and said the main plane. Then he roared at the sky that after hundreds of years, he had finally returned, and this time he would kill the hateful elven empress. So this was not just a summoned monster. This was an old disaster with a revenge list. On the Count's mansion tower, Isolde Brant smiled. She did not know what kind of demon he was, what layer of the abyss he came from, or what she had imported into her own city. She only knew he looked stronger than any powerhouse she had ever seen. For her, that was enough. Win first, regret later, noble politics everybody. Beside her, Cillian was already calculating how fast he could carry her through the secret passage if this thing turned on them. On the street, the black-robed cultists prostrated themselves around Gorv. Their leader pressed his forehead to the scorching stones until smoke rose from his skin, praising the raging fire of the abyss and the eternal flame. Gorv looked down at them like a butcher inspecting meat. Then he picked the lead cultist up with 2 fingers. The man looked ecstatic. He thought he had been chosen for a blessing. Technically, yes, just not one with a return policy. Gorv opened his jaws and bit him in half. The upper body vanished between his fangs. The lower body dropped to the stone with a wet thud. The street went silent except for swallowing. Then one of Isolde's personal guards vomited from the wall. Nobody mocked him. Several others had already gone white. These were elite private soldiers, but nobody had trained them for the module where a demon eats its worshippers like snacks. Leora sat pale on horseback and forced herself not to throw up. Rowan waited for her orders. For the first time since returning to claim the earldom, she hesitated. Her master was far away. Her cards were 800 cavalry, 3,000 infantry, and a dozen high-tier knights. In front of a flame fiend that suddenly looked like paperwork thrown at an eruption. Gorv swallowed the rest of the cultists one by one. They still looked ecstatic as he lifted them. To them, being eaten was fusion with their god. That is not devotion. That is a complete system crash. When the last cultist disappeared, magma light surged inside Gorv's chest. He exhaled, burning a charred mark into the stones, then looked over the battlefield. Mother and daughter slaughtering each other. Humans like to claim demons loved killing each other, but human nobles were no better. It amused him. Then he announced that the battlefield now belonged to Lord Gorv. He stomped. A wave of scorching air spread in every direction. Paving stones flipped. Red tongues of fire erupted from the street. Wooden frames ignited. Lime peeled from nearby walls. In one breath, the block became a sea of fire. Leora and the commanders ordered a full retreat. Infantry, cavalry, wounded, everyone who could move had to leave the block. Nobody argued after watching one footstep turn a street into a furnace. This was not an enemy numbers could bury. The dozen Tier 8 and Tier 9 knights stayed behind. They poured chi into weapons and shields, cutting apart flames so the soldiers could escape. Up on the tower, Cillian stopped waiting. He grabbed Isolde by the wrist and dragged her from the window. She struggled, laughing brokenly that she had summoned Gorv and had won. Cillian did not argue. He threw her over his shoulder, kicked open the secret door and ran. He no longer cared who won the war. He only cared that Isolde lived. Gorv watched the knights block his flames, then walked toward them. Each step crossed a huge distance and burned the stones beneath him into lava. Passing a burning house, he casually slapped a wall apart and sent flaming rubble crashing down. A knight blocked with his shield and was launched into a wall. He spat blood, stood again, and kept burning chi. The knights formed a desperate human wall in the burning alley. Gorv looked at them like ants. Then he raised one claw and pressed forward. A scorching shockwave tore down the street, plowing a black ravine through the stones and smashing the frontline knights aside. Protective chi shattered. Bodies crashed through burning walls. At the far end of the street, Cillian stood in front of the path leading to Leora. He could have run. Instead, he knelt toward Leora and begged her to spare Isolde's life. Isolde was still her nominal mother. In exchange, he offered everything he had. Then he stood and faced Gorv. Level 11 chi wrapped him in pale gold. The worn rose on his sword hilt seemed to bloom for one breath. Without waiting for Leora's answer, he charged. Leora watched him go. Isolde was still being dragged away, half-mad and muttering. Leora ordered the knight holding her to lock her up. After the battle, Leora would judge her personally. She did not agree to Cillian's request. His life or death had nothing to do with her. But Isolde could not die to a foreign enemy. Leora had to be the countess who judged the usurper herself. That was not mercy, that was inheritance law with teeth. Then Leora drew her sword and ordered every knight who could still move to follow her. This was their territory. Flame demon or not, he could not run wild here. A dozen human knights charged a level 16 Great Master Flame Fiend. Nobody needed a strategy board to understand the problem. Gorv barely bothered to move. Their chi-filled blades scraped shallow marks across his magma shell. He slapped one knight into the ruins, then turned as Cillian stabbed into a crack in his flank. Gorv looked at the sword, then at Cillian. He admitted Cillian was more interesting than the rest. Then he punched him in the chest. Cillian flew more than a dozen meters. Armor caved in, protective chi shattered. He stayed conscious but could not stand. Gorv pulled the sword from his flank and snapped it between two fingers like dry wood. Then he looked toward the shadows and called out the old thing watching the show. The shadow sighed. An elderly man stepped out. Gray hair, plain gray clothing, a simple longsword at his waist. Deep wrinkles, straight spine, calm gaze. Oral veil, the stabilizing pillar of House Forest. A level 16 human swordsman, Leora's great-great-grandfather. For the first time since arriving, Gorv looked excited. Oral walked into the burning street and said he had thought this was only an internal family struggle. A moment of negligence had produced a freak. Then he drew his sword. The blade rang and Oral vanished. Instant flash. One moment he stood dozens of steps away. The next he was in front of Gorv, sword carrying sword intent and battle aura toward the demon's head. Gorv raised his arm. Sparks exploded. The sword cut half an inch into his skin, and scorching blood dripped onto the stones. But Gorv did not move. Oral's pupils tightened. A strike like that should nearly kill a powerhouse of the same rank. Great Master Swordsmen were terrifying at equal level. But Gorv had blocked it with his body. The demon grinned, flicked Oral away, and healed the wound in a few breaths. Then he noticed that both Oral and the girl behind him carried faint elf aura. Oral attacked again. This time Gorv answered with a flame whip, a weapon woven from abyssal fire and controlled like part of his body. Oral recognized it from House Forest records and retreated. Taking that whip cleanly could end the fight. Gorv bragged that he had once whipped an elf legend to death with it. Then he rushed forward. His speed made no sense for something so large. The flame whip sealed Oral's retreat, and his other claw formed a magma-wrapped fist aimed at the old swordsman's chest. Oral formed a battlura shield. The fist hit. The shield shattered. Oral flew backward through a building, sending rubble and sparks into the street. But he stood again, ash in his hair, sword hand trembling. Then Gorv turned toward Leora. He asked if that little girl was Oral's great-great-granddaughter. She smelled of thin elven blood, far more fragrant than ordinary humans. Then he lunged at her. Leora was directing civilians into the southern alley when she heard him move. She turned, and Gorv was already less than 10 steps away. Heat slammed into her face. Sulfur choked the air. Her hand went to her staff, but there was no time. Rowan threw himself in front of her. He charged from the side with several knights, crossing blades to block the demon's fist. The impact shattered their battle aura like glass. The knights flew across the street. Rowan took the worst of it, crashed into the wall behind Leora, and slid down with blood spilling from his mouth. Alive, for now, those few breaths were enough. Oral appeared in front of Leora again, twice blasted away, twice standing back up. Not a casual hobby for a man over 200 years old. He told Leora to retreat and leave the demon to him. Then he poured every bit of level 16 battle aura into his sword. Gorv tilted his head and said rank was not the issue. Humans were weak. Their bodies were fragile. Their lives were short. Gorv's true body had lived in the abyss for thousands of years and fought the Elven Empress. What could a human who had lived less than 2 centuries compare with that? Oral answered with his sword. Golden light and dark red flame collided again and again. Shockwaves tore through the district. Houses collapsed. Streets became trenches. A corner of the city wall shook and fell. The bell tower ignited, and the bronze bell crashed into the plaza with one last muffled sound. Civilians were still inside. Some ran from burning homes. Some vanished in shockwaves before they could scream. Others dug through rubble for buried children, while fire painted every panicked face. Leora stood at the retreat line and watched her future territory burn. She watched Oral split the flames, only to be forced back again. She watched knights bleed. She watched civilians fall. She watched the strongest swordsman in House Forest get suppressed by a demon of the same level because race, age, and body had created a gap rank alone could not explain. And she could do nothing. She was the de facto ruler of this land. Thousands obeyed her, knights died for her, but she herself was still only a level 3 mage apprentice. She could not even survive one move from Gorv. Then she remembered the dragon blood. The bead Varen had given her before she left, sealed in a translucent shell and worn against her chest. She pulled it free. Emerald light glowed in the fires. It was the last card in her hand. Gorv kicked Oral away again, then stopped. His eyes locked onto the bead. He had felt its pull since earlier. His true body was a top-tier flame fiend who had lived for millennia, but this blood carried a power he had never encountered. Ancient, opposed to abyssal destruction, and just as deep. If he swallowed it, then found and devoured its owner, he might rise beyond an ordinary flame demon lord and covet the position of abyss monarch. As for the owner of the blood, if a little human girl could obtain it, how strong could the source be? That assumption was going to age like milk in a volcano. Gorv offered a deal. Give him the blood and he would withdraw. He would swear an abyssal vow. Leora could remain count, rebuild the city, and save her people. He sounded sincere. Too sincere. Leora smiled like she had just heard a demon say the stupidest sentence in history. Did he think she was 3 years old? Did any normal person believe demons? She said abyssal demons had such terrible credit that in the human world, they could not borrow a single copper coin. Then she put the dragon blood bead in her mouth and bit through the shell. The blood slid down her throat. With it came the power Varen had never shown her before. Abundance. It entered her body with the dragon blood, independent of this world's deity system, carried by a soul that had lived through 3 lifetimes. Gorv's pupils widened. He turned back to Oral and stopped playing. The flame whip sealed every angle while magma gathered around his fist. Oral raised his sword, but the whip shattered his chi first, and the fist slammed into the blade. A crack appeared in the sword. Oral was blasted back again, breathing hard, most of his chi consumed. But Leora was behind him, and he could not retreat. The dragon blood struck Leora's heart. Her body convulsed. Power surged through her blood vessels, recasting everything it touched. Her pupils shifted between human roundness and dragon slits. Pain tore through her, but she did not collapse, grow wings, or sprout scales. Unlike Varen's other dependents, she walked another path. The power of abundance entered with the dragon blood, balanced it, restricted it, and formed something even Varen had not expected. Leora fell to her knees on burning stone. Her fingernails dug into the cracks. Her fingertips blistered and bled, but she barely felt it. Only one thought rose from deep inside her. She wanted to become strong. She did not want to be weak anymore. She wanted to control her destiny. She wanted to protect her people. She wanted to fulfill her promise to him. Far away in Sunset Forest, inside the sealed vine hall on Rock Hill, Varen's emerald eyes opened in the darkness. His body was still transforming in deep slumber, but one contract thread had been plucked hard enough to reach him. The dragon blood had activated, but this was not ordinary dragon line conversion. This was abundance, a power he knew better than anyone's. If Leora could awaken it, she had stepped onto that path. And once someone stepped onto the path of abundance, dying became very difficult. The source of abundance in this world was Varen himself. Anyone who obtained it could only obtain it from him, and could never exceed his control. So he was not worried that someone could master it. He was more worried that nobody could. Leora had proved the door could open. Varen closed his eyes again. When he woke, he could try new things. In Forest City, Leora felt that brief gaze through the contract. It was as if Varen had said, "I see it. Go do what you need to do." Then the gaze withdrew. Leora swallowed the scream in her throat. It hurt, but her mind grew clearer. She wanted to drive out the demon. She wanted her people to live. She wanted to live up to her dragon lord's trust and to the knights who had charged ahead of her. Every "I want" pushed the power higher, because what fed abundance was the desire to help others. Not far away, Gorv had Oral by the head. The old swordsman's cracked sword had fallen. His battle chi flickered like a candle in wind. Gorv's fingers tightened for the final blow. Then he stopped. Energy across the district tilted toward Leora. Her aura skyrocketed, level 3, then level 13, and still rising. Gorv had seen abyss lords and legendary beings, but he had never seen a level 3 ant approach great master strength in less than a quarter of an hour. Then emerald energy spread outward. Wherever it passed, the abyss aura contaminating the land began to change. It was being purified. Gorv widened his eyes. Even the holy light of Mount Heaven could only suppress abyss aura. This girl was purifying it. Oral felt the demon's grip loosen. No seasoned warrior wastes that opening. His sword flew back into his hand. He cut Gorv's wrist, forced him to release, kicked off the demon's chest, and landed unsteadily with his sword propping him up. Then he saw Leora. The level 3 apprentice now carried power approaching Great Master. A hand pressed onto Oral's shoulder. Leora had reached him without him noticing. Warm power poured through her palms. His battle wounds healed in dozens of breaths. Then old injuries from his early years vanished too. Oral stared. He had seen healing magic and temple divine arts, but never anything this effortless, simple, and overwhelming. It looked like a true deity showing its hand. Leora answered the question on his face. All of this was the blessing of that lord. Then she turned toward Gorv. Oral stayed behind her, silently memorizing those words. Whatever that lord was, anyone who could grant this power was not ordinary. If that existence needed him one day, Oral would lend a hand. Gorv stood in the distance, now cautious. A power that could purify Abyss Aura was not something even he could ignore. Leora raised both hands. The earth split open. Countless vines burst from deep underground like waking pythons, sealing every path around Gorv. Gorv swung his flame whip. Abyssal fire wrapped the nearest vine and tried to burn it away. The vine caught fire, then absorbed the flames. Abyssal fire became nourishment, and the vine lunged forward unharmed. For the first time, panic flashed in Gorv's eyes. His flames were useless. Worse than useless, they were feeding the thing attacking him. Leora stood in the center of the vines, while energy from the world poured continuously into her body. This was the world's gift to a warrior protecting it from the abyss. The first round had belonged to terror. The second round belonged to abundance. Gorv smashed the first wave of vines with one punch. Before he could pull his fist back, Oral was already there. The old swordsman flashed through the gaps between vines. Golden battle aura wrapped around his blade and opened Gorv's shoulder. Gorv lashed back with the flame whip, but Oral had already retreated. Then emerald light fell on Oral's arm. The smoking burn healed within breaths. Gorv was furious because the fight had become his worst possible arrangement. Oral stood in front and took the heavy hits. Every time Gorv almost killed him, vines and treants burst out from every direction to hold the demon down. Then Leora sent one green light over, and the old man came back fresh enough to ruin his day again. This was not a duel anymore. This was customer support with unlimited warranty repairs. Worse, Leora was not getting tired. Energy kept pouring into her from the world itself. Gorv was only a clone, not the true body, and every bit of abyss power he spent here was gone forever. The world's rejection kept deepening too. What cost one portion of power in the abyss now cost double on the main plane. For the first time, Gorv began looking for a way out. Oral caught it instantly. He shouted for Leora to stop him with everything she had. The demon wanted to run, and Oral had already sent emergency runes for reinforcements the moment Gorv appeared. If they stalled long enough, the duchy's powerhouses would arrive. Those reinforcements were not minor names. The shield of the duchy, Galen, was a level 19 shield warrior with giant bloodline. The Wolf of the North was a level 16 berserker carrying northern barbarian bloodline. The Lava Hammer of Greycastle was a level 16 hammer warrior with dwarf bloodline. 3 regional monsters were closing on Forest City. Calling for help against a flame fiend is not shameful. That is called wanting to stay alive. Leora raised both hands. More vines and treants tore out of the ground, blocking every retreat route. Gorv whipped, shattered, and burned his way forward, but every time he rushed toward the city gate, vines caught him from the side. And whenever he tore free, Oral's sword came again. The 3 of them fought inside the burning city for 3 full days. Sometimes Leora's forest of vines drove Gorv into a dead end. Sometimes Gorv turned the street around him into magma. But with Leora's abundant support, Oral did not need to stop. Whenever his battle aura dropped, she filled him back up. Meanwhile, Gorv's clone drained day by day. By the 3rd evening, his flame whip had shortened, his fire had dimmed, and his magma shell was covered in wounds. Then he sensed 3 powerful auras approaching. Galen had arrived. The Wolf of the North had arrived. The Lava Hammer had arrived. Gorv understood. The invasion had failed. With 3 fresh powerhouses about to join and his clone already battered, escape was nearly impossible. So he pulled the flame whip back into his body and formed a giant flaming sword in both hands. Magma surged across the blade as he drove it into the ground. The earth split. Within several miles, streets, ruined houses, the broken statue, and the fallen clock tower pit all cracked like an eggshell. Dark red magma surged up from below. Stone softened, buildings melted, the entire surface sank. World-burning ring. It was not power a clone should have used. Gorv had forced a trace of legendary strength from his true body into the clone's core, and overloaded it to drag everything nearby into magma. A mushroom cloud rose over Forest City and dyed the twilight sky dark red. At the edge of the ruins, the three reinforcements arrived and stopped in silence. Forest City, once the largest city in the western Jaya Duchy, had become a lake of lava. Only one lonely section of battlement still stood above the fire. Galen named the attack from the royal family's Abyss invasion records. World-burning ring, the signature killing move of flame fiends. Against a flame fiend of the same rank, almost nobody at that rank or below survived. Rurik, the Wolf of the North, asked what Oral's family had provoked. Borin, the Lava Hammer, admitted even the dwarven powerhouses in the south could not produce destruction like this. Then Rurik, because apparently political opportunism was born into his bones, said that if Oral died inside, he would be interested in a few northern lands. Galen knew the counts always competed, and the royal family usually tolerated that. Divided counts made secure kings, but a flame fiend appearing in the duchy's heartland was not a border squabble. Mishandle this, and the whole duchy could be buried with it. Then a strange sound came from deep inside the lava lake. At the cores, Gorv knelt on the ground. His flames were nearly gone. His clone was ruined. Then emerald light appeared. Leora and Oral walked out. Their clothes were scorched, but their bodies were almost untouched. Gorv could not understand it. He had seen the world-burning ring swallow them. Their life auras had nearly vanished. Below legendary, nobody should have survived. What happened was simple and insane. The world-burning ring did almost kill Leora. Then the power of abundance dragged her back from the edge of death. When she opened her eyes and realized she was alive, she used that same power to save Oral, who had only a thread of breath left. But Oral did not carry abundance inside him. Gorv's attack had burned away his life origin. Leora could repair his wounds, but she could not fully replace the vitality consumed. From then on, Oral would have to stay near her and receive abundance regularly, or his remaining life would drain away like a leaking bucket. He lived, but the bill had terms. Gorv shouted that it was impossible. Leora answered calmly that a mere flame fiend could not understand the greatness of her lord. Compared with him, Gorv was dust on the ground, and her lord was the sun in the sky. Gorv froze, then he laughed from pure anger. He was a legendary Abyss Flame Fiend Lord. He had fought in the last Abyss invasion and slain legends. His flames had burned defense lines. His whip had killed a dwarf prince. His world-burning ring had melted an elf war tree. And now a teenage human girl was calling him dust. Humiliation burned away his last reason. His body swelled. The last power in his core erupted outward in white-hot light. Body-burning explosion. A flame fiend's near-death self-destruction. At the lake's edge, Galen grabbed Rurik and Borin, dragged them back, and raised his giant shield. Deep in the lava, orange-red fire shot into the sky. Heat swept outward, and magma fell like molten rain. The blast was smaller than the world-burning ring because Gorv's clone had already been drained, but it still shook the ruins. When the aftermath faded, footsteps came from the sea of fire. Leora and Oral walked out again. Alive, unharmed, the soldiers stared. Then one person knelt. Then another. City guards, surrendered mercenaries, noble private soldiers, Leora's army, people who had belonged to different factions minutes earlier, all knelt on the same scorched earth. Galen set his shield aside and bowed to Leora with the respect owed to a strong person who had saved the duchy and killed a flame fiend. Rurik and Borin exchanged glances, then lowered their weapons too. Tens of thousands knelt in the ruins. Nobody needed an explanation. Leora's momentum was unstoppable now. Oral followed behind her holding Gorv's gray-black head in one hand and the broken hilt of his ruined sword in the other. Leora's clothes were burned to rags, but her skin beneath was smooth and scarless. At her chest and Oral's, a faint dark red mark flickered. Gorv had left one final gift. The Abyss Mark. When his body exploded, two nearly invisible dark red threads burrowed into them. Any cultist on the main plane who worshipped Gorv could sense the mark if they came close enough. If Leora or Oral ever stepped into a plane touched by the Abyss, Gorv's true body could track them. Not a clone, the true flame demon lord. That was a demon's revenge, spite with no expiration date. Leora took Gorv's head from Oral and raised it high. Her voice carried across the survivors. She declared herself Leora Vale, Orthodox bloodline of House Forest and 21st Count of the Forest Earldom. The catastrophe, demon invasion, and ruin of Forest City had all been caused by a usurper who betrayed family law and invited abyssal fiends into the territory. But today, Leora stood there with the demon's head as proof. From that day on, she was the only legal lord of the Forest Earldom. All remnants of rebellion would be liquidated. The shattered city and land would be rebuilt. The displaced citizens would be protected. No council vote, no royal document, no bishop's coronation, just a 17-year-old girl in burned rags, ash on her face, holding a flame fiend's head beside a lava lake and announcing sovereignty. Honestly, that proof beat every document in the building. Anyone who disagreed was welcome to bring their own demon head as a counter-argument. The first to answer were her contracted knights, then Rowan, Garrick, her soldiers, and the citizens she had saved. Soon even the surrendered mercenaries, city guards, and noble troops joined in. Tens of thousands praised the Count of the Forest. Then Galen stepped forward. In the name of the Duchy royal family, he acknowledged Leora Vale as the 21st Count of the Forest Earldom. He also granted 2 rewards: the legal right to trailblaze westward and the authority to appoint or dismiss titles below Viscount. Either reward would make other counts jealous. Westward trailblaze rights meant Leora could legally expand toward the outer Sunset Forest and claim wilderness, clearings, and minerals. The title authority meant she could directly ennoble or depose lower nobles inside her territory, without waiting on duchy procedure. Nobody objected. The Lava Lake and Demon Head were doing a lot of legal work. After the announcement, Galen privately told Leora she had done well. Oral had briefly explained the battle. A level 16 Flame Fiend clone had been killed here, and luck alone could not explain that. Then he mentioned the master she had spoken of. He would not ask who that master was. Every powerhouse had secrets, but if one day she needed duchy support, the duchy would remember today. Leora thanked him and said the Forest Earldom would remember the duchy's trust. Rurik came next and asked what she planned to do with the demon head. If she hung it on the city gate, she should hang it high enough that wild dogs could not steal it. Leora said she would make it a specimen and place it in the new council hall. If the Northern Earl was interested, he was welcome to visit any time. Rurik froze, then burst out laughing. Borin came last. Greycastle owed her a favor. If the Flame Fiend had gained a foothold here, Greycastle's mines would have been next. In the future, if the Forest Earldom needed iron ore or weapons, she could send word. The price would be 80% of market rate. Leora shook his rough hand. Then the 3 reinforcements left. The trial of Isolde happened in a temporary tent, because the old city had become a geological event. When Isolde Brant was brought in, the tent went silent. She no longer looked like a regent. Her hair was tangled, her pupils unfocused, and she kept muttering the same words. She had summoned him. She had won. A priest from the duchy capital explained that demonic cultists had interfered with her mind, and Gorv's abyss aura had corroded her consciousness. Together, they had left her half-broken and unable to think clearly. Everyone understood. Isolde was finished. Leora looked at the stepmother who had tried to kill her. Everyone waited for judgment. Killing Isolde would satisfy the crowd, but a dead stepmother had no value beyond a moment of pleasure. Cillian was still alive too. After Gorv punched him away, knights had dragged him out and saved him. A level 11 knight was too valuable to waste, and his loyalty could be secured by sparing Isolde and binding him with a master-servant contract later. Finally, Leora spoke. Isolde had colluded with an abyss cult, led a flame fiend into the earldom, turned Forest City into lava, and caused thousands of civilians to die. Any one crime was enough to kill her 10 times. But Leora would not kill her. All Isolde's titles, positions, and property were stripped. She would be permanently imprisoned in an estate under guard. Without Leora's command, no one could visit, and Isolde could not take one step outside. Then Leora gave the real sentence. This was her final mercy, not because Isolde did not deserve death, but because killing her now would be letting her off too easily. She would live every day remembering what she lost, and every night remembering how she lost it. Isolde did not react. She only kept muttering. Then 2 soldiers carried in Cillian on a stretcher, wrapped in bandages. He had insisted on coming from the medical tent, and the guards said if they refused, he would crawl. He rolled off the stretcher, split his wounds open, and knelt with his forehead in the mud. He thanked Leora for sparing Isolde and swore that from then on, his life belonged to the Count alone. Leora helped him up. She did not need him to die for her. He only had to do his duties well, and he would receive what he deserved. Cillian looked up, red-eyed, unable to speak. No one exposed him. On the 5th day after the war, Leora held the first reward meeting. Garrick and the 6 contracted knights received lord titles and command positions in the cavalry. Rowan received a hereditary barony, including the former Brant estate and its farmlands. Other surviving high-tier knights received titles, fiefs, and posts according to merit. Leora fulfilled every promise, every title, every estate, every gold coin. No delays, no missing names. The news spread through the camp, and hesitant noble soldiers immediately tore off old family crests and replaced them with the silver-threaded vine banner of House Forest. On the 7th day after the war, Leora issued the first reconstruction decree. The new city would be built on open highland dozens of miles east of Old Forest City, near a tributary, a wild fruit forest, and the earldom's main trade roads. Craftsmen said the site worked, but laying the wall foundation alone would normally take 3 months. Leora said it would not take that long. She ordered everyone to the edge of the highland, removed her boots, and stepped barefoot onto the soil. Soldiers, craftsmen, wounded men, women with children, and old people with crutches gathered to watch. Nobody knew what the new Count of the Forest planned, but after the lava lake, nobody doubted she could do something. Leora squatted and placed both hands on the earth. For one moment, every sound stopped. Then abundance flowed from her palms into the ground. The earth began to move. A vine broke through at the future meeting point of the main street and central square. Then countless vines and trees rose along the blueprint in Leora's mind, weaving house skeletons, street lines, and the square's outline. Mud giants rose at the city wall foundation line, each larger than an ogre. They drove their hands into the soil and began tamping. One punch compacted soft ground. A dozen giants followed in a row, every strike making the earth tremble. A crying child stared at them, tugged his mother's sleeve, and shouted that the mudmen were helping build houses. And somehow, that was exactly true. Treants walked out of the northern fruit forest. Once they reached their positions, their bodies sank, trunks split into board-like walls, branches wove into roof frames, and roots spread underground to reinforce foundations. Leora felt something changing inside her while she worked. She did not show it. She was the Count of the Forest, the builder of the new city, and the girl who had walked out of fire. She could not be the one to break the myth she had just created. In a few hours, the main skeleton of a city stood where empty highland had been. Details would still need craftsmen and laborers, but the shape was there. Main road, central square, Count's mansion, barracks, residential district, market, and an irregular city wall following the highland's edge like something grown by nature. The onlookers knelt everywhere. Then someone shouted for Forest City, for the Count of the Forest, for Lord Leora. The highland erupted. A craftsman who had said 3 months were needed touched the compacted wall, muttered that he had lived his whole life in vain, then removed his hat and bowed. Leora only raised one hand lightly and left. She was too exhausted to accept the cheers. News spread faster than horses. That night, the Northern Earl's agents heard bards singing about a blonde girl stepping barefoot into mud and growing a city from the earth. At first, they assumed the bard was drunk. Then 3 scout channels confirmed it. The Northern Earl sat silently, then ordered tariffs for forest earldom caravans passing through the north cut in half. No explanation. He simply hid the report that called Leora a suspected apostle, above Great Master level deep in his drawer. Borin of Greycastle heard the news and quietly added another 10% discount to the iron ore already promised. In the duchy capital, Galen reported to the king. The king asked if they had investigated Leora's master. Galen said they found nothing. Her power cleansed Abyss Aura, but it matched no known divine spell system and appeared in no royal records. The king stayed silent, then said it was better not to know. Some existences only brought trouble once you knew about them. Soon every faction's intelligence report began almost the same way. The new Count of the Forest, Leora Vale, was suspected to be an apostle of a powerful unknown existence, able to accelerate plant growth on a massive scale and control soil. Preliminary assessment, above Great Master level. Most reports ended with the same advice. Wait and see. While the world whispered her name, Leora sat alone in the temporary study of the newly grown Count's mansion and looked at her hands. On the back of her left hand, a thin, translucent ginkgo leaf pattern had begun emerging from her knuckles. Another spread along her forearm from wrist to elbow, connected by faint vine-like lines. There was no pain. That frightened her more. If her body rejected it, she would know something was wrong. Instead, her body accepted it, welcomed it, treated the pattern like it belonged there. This was the backlash from abusing abundance. 3 days and nights of battle had pushed the power to its limit. The world-burning ring and body-burning explosion had nearly killed her, and abundance had dragged her back each time. Then she had used it to build the skeleton of an entire city. Power was never free. The more she used it, the deeper it seeped into her flesh and blood. Little by little, she was becoming a better container for it. For now, the marks were only a few hidden ginkgo leaves beneath her sleeves. But next time, the time after that, would she still be herself? Leora did not know. She pulled her sleeves down to cover the patterns. Outside the window, the vine skeleton of the new city glowed faintly emerald in the night. In the distance, Old Forest City's lava lake had cooled into black volcanic stone, carved into the land like a huge scar. The only one who might understand this was Varen. But the Dragon Lord was still sleeping. So for now, all she could do was wait. And while the human world whispered about her, deep in Sunset Forest, the Abundance tribe was changing too. The first person to notice something wrong was not a mage, a commander, or one of the tribe's famous names. It was a kobold guard outside Varen's sleeping hall, standing night watch and thinking about mushroom soup after his shift. Respectfully, that was the most normal thought anyone in this tribe had had in weeks. Then green fluorescence began floating out of the hall. It drifted from the place where Varen slept and dissolved into the air. At first, the guard thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then dozens of wildflowers burst from the ground beneath his feet, sprouting, growing, and blooming in only a few breaths. That was when the soup plan died. The guard ran. He warned the other sentry away from Rock Hill, then sprinted to find Grick, who was at the Venom pig pen personally watching the newest batch of cubs feed. The pig pen sat 10 miles west of the stronghold, in the damp lowland Leora had chosen. Grick was acting head of the tribe while the major leaders were away, but his heart still lived among the pigs. A man can be promoted into administration and still know where he belongs. The guard nearly crashed into the fence and shouted that something was happening at the Dragon Lord's Hall. Grick did not ask for a full report. He ran. By the time he reached the stronghold, the anomaly had erupted. Kobold miners sat shirtless near the barracks with emerald scales growing along their arms. Across the base, kobolds were undergoing large-scale atavism as the dragon blood in them awakened further. One miner stared at his newly scaled companion, then looked down at his own unchanged arms. Nothing. His disappointment was visible. My man had been skipped by the patch update. The gnolls changed even more obviously. Tier 2 hunters grew bare-thick fur, black claws, and longer fangs. One stared into a water basin and asked whether he had become handsome. A nearby half-elf archer rolled her eyes. Then she discovered she could move plants with a thought. The whole stronghold was changing. Vines wrapped the walls into a green barrier. Wildflowers grew from watchtower pillars. Bushes outside the base became towering trees overnight. Silver-veined magic herbs spread across empty ground, and half-elves skilled in herbalism confirmed they were rare species that should have been hard to find one by one. Now they were growing beside the wall like weeds. Varen was asleep, and the economy was already misbehaving. Grick took one deep breath and began giving orders. Messengers would call back Brack, Sivrin, Illyra, and Var. Anyone with physical abnormalities would gather in the central clearing, separated by race. Anyone without abnormalities would stay at their post. Rock Hill became a restricted zone within 1 mile, with doubled patrols. Pigpen workers would eat and sleep at the pen until further notice, and any venom pig abnormality had to be reported immediately. No one argued. With the 4 major leaders absent, Grick was the acting head, and everyone recognized the chain of command. For the next 2 days, the changes spread outward from Varen's hall. Nature sprites appeared on the second day, tiny translucent things with leaf-like wings smaller than a kobold's fist. They floated out of blooming flowers and began tending the new magic herb patches, clearing dew and straightening bent petals. A kobold patrol guard watched one for a long time, then poked it. The sprite dodged, slapped his fingertip, hugged a dewdrop bigger than itself, and flew away in a fury. The kobold stared at his finger like he had just been defeated by office stationery. Then came treants. Some were gentle and cleared roads blocked by new vines. Others were violent from births. One newly awakened treant whipped anyone it saw and sent a gnoll guard flying, so Grick personally led people to chop it into firewood. He was still cursing while it burned. Brack and Sivrin returned first from the eastern mines. Brack stopped at the gate, staring at the familiar base turned into a green kingdom, then felt the bottleneck inside his own body loosen. The closer he came to headquarters, the stronger his vitality became. Sivrin touched the living vines on the wall with his staff. The vines unfurled a tender leaf toward him. He understood at once. This was Varen's power overflowing naturally during deep sleep. Var arrived by evening from the western hunting grounds. He felt the same rising vitality, saw mutated treants attacking patrols, and joined the patrols without a speech. Violence management mode. Illyra arrived last on the 3rd morning. The half-elf settlements were too large to leave without arrangements. When she descended from the sky, wheat-ear patterns had appeared across her dragon wings. Once the leaders gathered, Grick reported the truths. Most changes were good. Kobold atavism, sharper gnoll fangs and claws, half-elf natural spell awakenings. But some people could not withstand the power. Their bodies changed faster than their wills could bear, and they began losing control. The failures started heavily on the 3rd day. A kobold miner woke, crouched in a barracks corner, and started talking to himself. His pupils glowed hollow emerald. Ginkgo leaves covered his arms. Vines pushed from under his fingernails. Shoots grew from his back. His companion called his name. No answer. When the companion reached out, the miner opened his mouth, and inside was only tangled petals. Then he lunged. Var arrived with a patrol squad and drove a spear through the miner's heart. Even after death, the plants kept spreading from the corpse, so they had to burn him. Everyone watched the fire in silence. Yesterday, he had been bragging that 3 new scales had grown, and maybe he could become a warrior. Yesterday, hope. Today, ash. That cost had no room for jokes. More failures followed. A knoll hunter lost sanity on patrol, his fangs growing so long they pierced his upper palate. He tore apart a caged mutant creature, then attacked his patrol captain. Var killed him personally, and emerald liquid from his throat took root where it hit the ground. Var gave the gnolls one rule: if a comrade lost control, do not hesitate. If they softened their hearts, they would be the ones who died. Among the half-elves, a young archer who had awakened vine magic rushed from the barracks wrapped in ginkgo leaves. She collapsed at the wall base, and plants burst from inside her body until she became a small garden. When Alira arrived, the archer still had half a mouth left and begged to be killed because it hurt too much. Alira pressed one hand to her forehead and drew her short sword with the other. Afterward, she handed an emerald twig to the archer's companion. Planted on her grave, Brack and Sivrin handled kobold failures more bluntly. Brack carried the axe. Sivrin recorded who could survive and who could not. Those who could not were ended and burned. After the ashes cooled, tiny silver flowers grew from the burn sites. The cleanup lasted 2 days. Most people adapted and awakened locked potential. Those whose consciousness could not hold became the price of this wave of evolution. Opportunity and disaster had arrived together, holding hands like they owned the place. On the 5th evening, the leaders met in a temporary command tent at the foot of Rock Hill. Elira polished her short sword. Brack leaned against a pillar. Sivrin sorted records. Var sat by the entrance. Grick stood near the tent flap, mud still on his trouser legs, the old scar on his shoulder glowing faintly under the green light. Strangely, Grick himself had barely changed. He only felt vaguely different. The Dragon Lord was still sleeping. Elira looked toward Rock Hill, where green fluorescence still leaked from the vines, though less than before. They did not know exactly what was happening to Varen, but their duty was simple: guard the Abundance tribe. Brack agreed. Before Varen woke, they would clean up every mess they could. A tidy tribe was better than waking their lord to chaos. Then the meeting turned to defense. Grick's records covered the table. Nature sprites, treants, magic herbs, atavistic awakenings. Good. Mutation failures, violent treants, and demonic beasts pouring in from the forest. Trouble. All of it came from Varen's slumber. Elira said the demonic beasts were not coming because they hated the tribe. They were drawn by Varen's overflowing power like insects to honey. Brack's solution was direct: kill as many as came. He could transfer half his eastern force back without losing the mines. Sivrin slowed him down. The overflow did not distinguish friend from enemy. It strengthened the tribe, but it could also strengthen outsiders. If it lasted briefly, they could handle beasts and small tribes from the outer and middle forest. If it lasted long enough to pull things from the depths, the problem would change completely. Then Var spoke. The previous evening, his hunters had intercepted a rank 6 iron-skinned rhinoceros on the western side. That beast normally stayed in the middle forest. This one acted bewitched. Even after its legs were cut off, it still crawled toward headquarters. That was not coincidence. At that moment, a gnoll patroller entered with blood on his fur and a fresh scratch on one forepaw. A demonic beast horde had appeared beyond the western defense line. Over 100 beasts, mixed species: shadow wolves, iron-skinned tusked pigs, stone-armored pythons, and several unknown breeds. They were biting each other as they came, but still moving in the same direction. Toward headquarters, the western line could hold for now, but another wave of the same size would break through. Sivrin drew a map on the ground. If they waited at the stockade, the beasts would gather into one massive horde. Better to push defense lines outward, intercepting them layer by layer before they reached the base. Brack would transfer soldiers back to guard the east. Var would bring gnoll hunters to the west, using ambush and harassment in dense forest. Elira would bring 50 newly trained half-elf rangers ahead of schedule, and raise the alert level in Jirla settlement. Grick would hold the inner circle: order, logistics, wounded reception, and the pig pens. The venom pigs had also been acting strange. Some boars had become irritable, eaten twice as much, and gained weight quickly. Good sign, bad sign, nobody knew. Because this tribe could not have one normal department, even the pigs were potentially plot-relevant now. Then Brack raised a more important issue. Future personnel sent to headquarters could not be chosen by strength alone. Sivrin had compared cases from the cleanup. A rank 4 could lose control, while a rank 3 stayed stable. Some rank 1 miners worked near Rock Hill for 2 days and adapted well. Some rank 5 warriors nearly turned into wood in less than half an hour. The deciding factor was not rank, not strength, willpower. Elira said that discovery mattered more than all the patrol reports combined. So Sivrin proposed a screening rule. Anyone assigned to headquarters had to spend 1 full day at the edge of Rock Hill's foot. If they showed no adverse reaction, they stayed. Minor abnormalities meant 3 days of observation. Anyone losing control would be transferred away to outer outposts. Illyria made it official. The rule applied to ordinary soldiers, captains, and the leaders themselves. No exceptions, everything for the Dragon Lord. Everything for the tribe. The final defense plan split the outer line into 4 sections. Var guarded the west with knoll ambush tactics. Brack guarded the east near the mines. Sivrin guarded the north, where Cliff suited spells and traps. Illyria guarded the south with half-elf archers and rangers. Liaison posts would connect the sections. No unauthorized pursuit. Then Sivrin added a key point. Demonic beasts were not exactly the enemy. They were attracted by Varen's power, just like the flowers and trees. If one mutated into intelligence or showed no hostility, commanders could observe under safe conditions before killing it. Illyria accepted with a hard boundary, full alert during observation, and any attack meant immediate death. The meeting ended. Grick watched the 4 leaders disappear into the night, then looked back at Rock Hill. Part of him wanted to test his own willpower at the foot of the hill. He was one of the first to follow the Dragon Lord. It would look good for his face. Then he remembered the pigs had not been fed. So he went to the pig pen. Between heaven and earth, feeding pigs came first. That was a task Varen had personally given him, and to Grick, that made it one of the most important jobs in the tribe. Before dawn, Var set out. The western hunting grounds were half a day of forced marching from headquarters. He brought only a dozen fast hunters to select reinforcements, leaving the rest to strengthen the defense line. On the way, he saw how much the forest had changed. Canopies were thicker, vines hung heavier, mushrooms under roots had grown plumper. At a stream, he saw his reflection. His fur was denser, his fangs were longer and sharper. His jawline had changed enough that he looked less like an ordinary gnoll and more like a werewolf. Strength was rising, reaction speed was rising, recovery too. At the hunting camp, more than 200 gnolls had volunteered to defend headquarters as soon as they heard the mission was to guard the Dragon Lord near Rock Hill. Many understood they might become stronger. Many also understood failure meant death. In this wasteland, some feared never becoming stronger more than death. Var selected the 200 strongest and formed a force of 220 hunters. He gave no long speech. He raised his claws, showed his new fangs, and said one sentence. Dragon Lord above. Loyalty. The gnolls shouted it back until the forest shook. Once back, Var spread the hunters in layers along the western forest path. Small beast groups would be killed on the spot. Large groups would be delayed and drawn into ambush circles. Var himself stood between the first and second defense lines. A gnoll chieftain did not stand in a safe place. This land only recognized the strongest as leader. Then a Tier 7, frenzied forest elephant charged from the dense forest. It snapped a bolthic ironwood tree as it came, larger than a normal forest elephant, with dead eyes and torn vines around its tusks. Its goal was clear: Abundance headquarters. Var raised one claw, telling the scouts not to move, and walked toward it alone. When it came within 5 steps, he sidestepped the tusks and swept his claw across the inside of its front leg, one of the few places not protected by thick hide. The flesh opened cleanly, blood soaked half his body. The elephant's front leg failed, and it crashed down. Var was already on its back, claws digging into the folds of hide, foreclaws raised over the weak point between neck and skull. One strike, the elephant collapsed for good. The scouts stared from behind rocks with open mouths. In the past, a beast like that required an entire hunting team and an hour or 2 of wearing it down. Today, Var killed it in moments. He looked at his claws. The nail edges carried a faint dark gold sheen. Before, breaking a creature like this had been the hardest part. Now his claws cut through almost without resistance. Dragon blood was making him sharper and hungrier. At the stream, he touched the shoulder that should have been injured during the fight and felt no pain. He looked toward headquarters. The Dragon Lord was still sleeping, but his power was spreading. Var did not understand the abundance path, power overflow, or atavism. He understood one thing clearly. All of this began because he had laid down his arms and chosen to follow Varen. He had made many decisions in his life. Most had been wrong. This one was right. Then a scout rushed back. 5 miles west, hundreds of goblins had appeared, mixed with demonic beasts, and the number was still growing. Var put away his thoughts and raised his claw. More than 200 gnoll hunters rose silently from the forest shadows, spear shafts gripped tight, eyes flashing dark green. Var charged at the front. He did not care about goblins. Green-skinned shorties could double their number and still not be enough for him alone. But Sivrin's warning stayed in his mind. If the mutation lasted long enough, it would not only attract goblins and frenzied forest elephants, the truly terrifying things from deep in the forest, the existences even ogres dared not approach would eventually be drawn in. Var did not know when that day would come. He only knew that before it arrived, he had to kill more demonic beasts and push the defense line farther out. Deep inside the forest, that day was already walking toward them. Inside a colossal ancient tree, emerald dragon pupils opened in the darkness. The being that had lurked in the forest core for years had finally been awakened by Varen's overflowing power. His name was Marith Morvathrin. From head to tail, he exceeded 12 meters. Dark green scales blended perfectly with the gloomy deep forest. He was a green dragon about to enter adulthood, and the ancient tree around him was his lair. A natural fortress filled with gold, gems, magic fragments, and trophies. Marith was the undisputed overlord of the core area. Years ago, that title had belonged to a level 16 ogre warlord who ruled ogres, goblins, bugbears, and a snakeman tribe by brute force. Marith had not defeated him through strength alone. Before the battle, he secretly incited the snakemen to rebel, promising them freedom and independent territory afterward. Selara, the snakeman leader, led 3 generals above level 10 into the ogre rear, while Marith attacked from the front. The ogre warlord died, never realizing the fatal blow had come from inside his own rule. Marith kept his promise. The snakemen gained territory and became his core dependents. Over the years, he turned them into the strongest military force in the core area. 6 generals above level 10 and thousands of troops. A young green dragon near Great Master tier, backed by that army, was a regional powerhouse. And yet Marith had never expanded outward. That was where he was smarter than most dragons. He had seen monster tribes destroyed by neighboring nations for expanding too aggressively. One even had an iron dragon, and it still fell beneath a siege of great masters. So Marith stayed hidden, gathering strength, managing the snakemen, waiting until he became legendary before revealing himself to the world. Then, over a month ago, he smelled something. A power traveled through his magical senses. Warmth, growth, a perfect fit for a green dragon's plant affinity, and beneath it, faint danger. At first, he tried to ignore it, but the scent grew clearer, day by day stronger. It disturbed his sleep until greed finally opened his eyes. He believed that if he found the source and swallowed it, he could break through the bottleneck that blocked ordinary adult dragons. Within 20 years, maybe 30 at most, he could step into legend. Once that thought appeared, he could not push it back down. But his old survival instinct saved him from charging out personally. He called for Selara. The snakeman leader arrived quickly, lower body serpent, upper body human-shaped, dark green scales shifting into smooth skin at her waist. She carried a venom-coated spear smeared with her own neurotoxin, deadly to anything below Great Master if it broke skin. She was level 13, respectful and restrained. Marith asked if she sensed the power. She closed her eyes, extended her perception, then shook her head. Nothing, only he could detect it. It was not abyssal, not elemental, not any divine spell system he knew. It fit green dragon power perfectly, and he was certain that devouring its source would let him cross into legend. Selara asked if he wanted her to investigate. Marith's tail cracked the ancient wooden floor. Find it, he ordered. Use any people and any methods required. But no matter what she saw, no matter how weak the source looked, she must not act, alert anyone, or expose their location. Once found, she had to report immediately. He wanted the source, its location, its guards, nearby factions, every detail. Nothing missed. They had survived this long by never exposing themselves first. This time would be the same. Selara bowed and withdrew. Alone again, Marith coiled on his gold and tried to sleep. He failed. The scent kept stirring his senses. He turned over, covered his head with his wings, pressed his tail beneath his nose. Still nothing. Finally, he opened his eyes and spoke into the hollow. No matter who or where the source was, that power was his. And only his. Selara returned to the Snakeman camp and summoned all 6 generals. She repeated Marith's orders word for word. Snakeman scouts spread from the deepest core area, covering the core and middle forest, pushing toward the outer perimeter at top speed. Swift, silent, deadly. Meanwhile, at the western defense line, Var crouched behind a split dead tree, cleaning blood from his tusks. He had just repelled the second demonic beast charge. His left shoulder was still numb from a stone-armored python's tail strike. He did not know that deep in the forest, an older green dragon had already turned his gaze toward them. He did not know Snakeman scouts were silently closing in. He only shook the blood from his claws, stood, and signaled the hunters behind him to prepare. The next wave was coming soon. Var had just ripped his claws out of an iron-skinned, tusked pig when a half-elf horn sounded from the east. Not a victory horn, a rescue horn. Alira arrived with more than 300 half-elf rangers and 5 temporarily enlightened treants, and one look at the western line told her everything. The west was taking more than 3 times the pressure of the southern side. Less than half of Var's 200-plus Knoll hunters could still stand, and the rest were wounded, bandaging themselves against roots or too hurt to return to formation. Alira said they were late. Var wiped blood from his claws and said as long as they were here, it counted. The waves had been getting worse. Demonic beasts above level 10 had started appearing, and a stone-armored python the size of a forest elephant had already crushed several gnolls before dying. It did not gently raise the stakes. It kicked the door open and threw a health bar at the floor. Alira deployed instantly. 100 archers took the trees and rocks, turning the line into a long-range kill zone. 50 plant control half-elves strengthened the vine barriers and awakened ancient trees into temporary treants, with about a dozen of them able to communicate with plants directly. The remaining 150 rangers joined the gnolls on the melee line. Alira rose into the air to command the field. Var stood at the front with the dozen mutated gnolls, who had changed the most during Varen's sleeping overflow. Those gnolls had gained regeneration comparable to an ogre's. Wounds stopped bleeding within breaths. Broken bones could recover in half a day. The cost was brutal hunger, so most of the demonic beast meat went to them after every cleanup. Honestly fair, if your job is stand in front and get hit first, the buffet better be included. The battlefield roles became simple. Half-elf arrows handled most beasts below Tier 5. Tier 6 to Tier 9 beasts were trapped by vines and treants, then attacked from the flanks by gnolls. Anything above level 10 went to Var and Alira. A level 10 black-scaled python burst from the forest, and Var bit into its neck while Alira shot through its skull from above with a sword arrow. A level 11 earth-splitting bear smashed through the vine wall, so Alira blinded it with wind from her dragon wings, and Var tore open its belly from below. No ceremony, just teamwork with teeth. By night, the corpse piles had become walls of their own. Forest elephant bodies, iron-skinned tusked pigs, stone-armored pythons, goblins, and smaller beasts stacked together until the western line looked less defended and more buried. The tribe had a casualty problem. It also had a meat supply solution. This place kept turning disasters into inventory, and I respect the efficiency even while deeply questioning the lifestyle. When the last beast dropped, Var stood in the field covered in blood while his own wounds slowly closed. Alira sat nearby wiping her sword, her wings folded and her breathing only slightly uneven. The rangers counted arrows. The gnolls cut edible meat from the fallen beasts. For a short time, the Abundance tribe would not lack food. Then Var and Alira both looked west. Same patch of shadow, same instinct. Alira's hand went to her short sword. Var stared for a while, then told everyone to rest the wounded and rotate the watch. Whatever was hiding there, another beast wave could arrive at any time. Inside that shadow, Snakeman General Sareth was already retreating. He had blended into bark and darkness, slowed his breathing, and suppressed his heartbeat. As one of the 6 Snakeman generals above level 10, he had personally scouted Marith's target, and he had seen enough. Mutated gnolls with ogre-like recovery. Var tearing large beasts apart with bare claws. Half-elves controlling plants and turning the defense line into a living trap. This was not a mob. This was an organized multi-race army, sitting exactly in the direction of the mysterious power Marith wanted. Sareth returned to the core area by dawn and reported to Celera. She heard the full account. Gnolls recovering faster than they should, half-elves manipulating plants, layered defense lines, communication posts, and organized responses to different beast ranks. Celera had fought ogres, beasts, and rival tribes for years. Gnolls and half-elves fighting together like a proper army was not normal. So she brought Sareth to Marith's dragon nest. The ancient tree was sealed by a translucent magical barrier. Celera used the emerald scale Marith had given her during her dragon blood transformation, and the barrier opened. Inside, dragon runes covered the wooden walls, emerald magic flowed through them, and the skull of the rank 16 ogre warlord floated at the center of the array. That skull was the core of the nest. The lair could withstand attacks below Great Master rank, block outside detection, and stop anyone without a dragon blood imprint from entering. So Marith was greedy, yes, but stupid, absolutely not. He had turned a tree into a fortress, and a dead ogre warlord into home security. That is villain real estate with a security deposit. Marith lay on his gold in the deepest part of the nest, 12 meters of dark green scales coiled in the gloom. Celera explained the report, and Marith ordered Sareth to speak. Sareth froze under the Dragon Lord's stare. Celera nudged him, and he finally gave every detail, including the words the mutated gnolls muttered whenever their wounds healed. Marith went silent. Then he stood, gold coins shifted beneath him, his wings opened halfway and greed burned in his pupils. Ogre-level recovery, plant-controlling half-elves, a multi-race tribe rising from nowhere. All of it in the same direction as the power calling to him. For one breath, Marith almost rushed out. A low dragon roar shook the lair, and the runes flashed along the walls. Then he forced himself still. He had hidden in Sunset Forest for decades without human nations finding and besieging him. He had watched stronger, louder monsters get destroyed because they expanded too fast. If this power was really what he suspected, charging in blind would be throwing away the future he had waited for. So he chose the colder move. He ordered Celera to recall the scouts, mobilize the army, and drive the medium-sized tribes of the Middle Forest west. No explanations, no alliances, just shove them toward the Abundance tribe and let them test the hidden cards. Whether they died or broke through, Marith would learn something. Less than half an hour later, the 3,000-strong Snake Man army moved. First came the Bloodaxe tribe. Its leader, Crag, was a level 11 Gnoll warlord with more than 1,000 Gnolls under him, and a camp built under a natural rock hill. He had ruled that area for over a decade, strong enough that small tribes and beast groups usually avoided him. Then 3,000 snake men appeared. 6 generals led the formation, and Celera stood in the center on a carried platform with her poisoned spear. Crag tried to negotiate. Bloodaxe had paid tribute every year. They had never entered Snake Man territory. If the issue was more tribute, they could discuss it. My guy brought customer service energy to an eviction notice. Celera told him to leave the forest and head west before dark. Crag looked back at the caves his people had carved for more than 10 years. He knew he could not win, but he still tried to speak. Celera tilted her head. Sarith and another level 10 Snake Man general struck together, blasting Crag through his own fence and into the rubble below the hill. Celera told him he had no right to negotiate. If she returned, it would not just be to remove him. Crag lowered his head and ordered the retreat. Next came the Grayskin tribe, more than 3,000 goblins, huge in number and weak in actual fighting power. Their chief, Nibek, had only just entered level 10. When the Snakemen arrived, he did not posture, bargain, or discover sudden dignity. He ran out, knelt by the road, and shouted that they would leave by themselves. Survival instincts, max level. Then he screamed at his goblins to run, and the whole tribe flooded west in chaos. Last came Deep Furnace Keep. More than 800 dwarves lived there under Doran, a level 12 chieftain with a gray beard and a cracked ruby on his helmet. Their settlement sat around an abandoned ancient dwarf mine, and it was the same mine the dwarf brothers had once escaped before being captured, sold into the Jaya Duchy, and eventually taken in by the Abundance tribe. Doran watched the Snake Man army approach and understood immediately. Years ago, after Marith killed the ogre warlord and gave the Snakemen the core area, he had known this day would come. So he ordered the dwarves to pack weapons, food, anvils, and forging tools. The furnaces and ore stayed behind because they were too heavy. The dwarves did not panic. They did not beg. Doran was the last to leave the mine entrance. He looked back once, then turned west. In less than 3 days, the Bloodaxe Gnolls, Grayskin Goblins, and Deep Furnace Dwarves were all pushed onto the same road. The north meant human duchies. The south meant the Dwarf Kingdom, which would not take in Gnolls and Goblins. The east meant Elven territory. West was the only path left. And at the western defense line, Var was roasting an iron-skinned tusked pig rib beside the fire, completely unaware that 3 displaced factions were walking straight toward him. Then the scouts arrived. One reported more than 1,000 gnolls, less than 5 miles west of the outer line. A second reported thousands of goblins to the south. A third reported around 800 armed dwarves advancing from the north. Alira dropped from the air and identified the dwarves as Deep Furnace Keep. The half-elves had maps of the Middle Forest factions, though they still did not know the Snake Man tribe's master was a dragon. Only the 3 tribes close to the core area knew that part. 2 hours later, Var and Alira observed the enemy positions from an ancient tree. Bloodaxe had camped less than 5 miles west. Grayskin spread across the south in loose, messy camps. Deep Furnace held the north in a semicircular trailer position, armed dwarves waiting behind it. 3 tribes, 3 directions, same timing. Alira said only one faction in Sunset Forest could drive all 3 west at once. The core area, the Snake Man tribe. Var understood, even without saying the name aloud. In the Bloodaxe camp, Crag studied the Abundance line and realized it was not a barbaric tribe. The gnolls opposite him carried standardized iron sabers, and the half-elf archers wore proper leather armor. It looked like an army. Still, he had no clean exit. If he refused to fight, the Snake Men would punish him from behind. If he won, he might carve out new territory. So he called the other chiefs. Nibek came fast because Grayskin had the most bodies and the least confidence. Doran came last with 2 retainers and made his position clear before anyone got romantic about war. Crag said the Snake Men were using them to test the unknown tribe. His plan was to fight. Bloodaxe would attack the front, Grayskin would harass from the south and disturb the archers with goblins and forest wolf riders, and Deep Furnace would provide weapons and equipment. Doran refused to charge. Deep Furnace would not risk dwarf lives for the Snake Men. Their population was small, their reproduction slow, and they would not become someone else's knife. They would supply gear, nothing more. Crag accepted. He did not trust Nibek's courage, and he did not expect Doran to bleed for him, but the Snakeman's threat forced all three tribes to at least look useful. Across the field, the Abundance line stayed silent. Crag wondered what they were waiting for. Reinforcements. Var and Alira had requested help the moment the three tribes appeared, and the enemy meeting gave them time. Early the next morning, Brack arrived with 300 Kobold swordsman shield-bearers, followed by 400 auxiliary soldiers with new iron spearheads. Sivrin came with them on a temporarily domesticated forest wolf, after leaving 200 troops on the eastern defense line for Grick. Var gave the numbers: more than 1,000 gnolls, more than 3,000 goblins, 800 dwarves. Brack judged the Bloodex gnolls as the main frontal threat. The goblins had numbers but weak combat power, and the dwarves had not yet shown movement. So he brought the captured ogres. They had spent so long carrying stones in the mines that they had grown even stronger. Their chains were removed, the iron rings still around their necks, and they had been promised proper work at the main camp if they earned merit. The ogres shouted that they would fight. For them, this was not punishment. This was a promotion interview with boulders. About 100 gnoll hunters from the western hunting grounds also joined the front row. Last came another 300 half-elf rangers led by Alira's brother, Neris, carrying his vine-wrapped longbow with a living bowstring. He told Alira that Elder Arvin had arranged everything at Jirla's settlement, so she did not need to worry. Then the Abundance formation locked into place. Kobold swordsman shieldbearers held the thick center. Gnoll hunters guarded both sides. Half-elf rangers spread behind trees and rocks. Ogres crouched at the rear with boulders ready. 1,500 people, 4 races, 1 defense line. When Crag saw the reinforcements, his original plan died quietly. Before, he thought Bloodex could smash through a few hundred defenders, while goblins harassed the flank. Now the opposing force had doubled, morale was high, every race had a clear battlefield role, and ogres were waiting in the back. Charging now would be suicide with better posture. Crag was brave, he was not stupid. He called Nibek and Doran again. Doran repeated that the dwarves would provide equipment, but would not go to the front. Nibek asked what they could do if they could not fight and could not retreat. Crag chose delay. On the surface, they would keep preparing to attack. In reality, they would only send small units for brief skirmishes. If possible, they would contact the Abundance tribe, share what they knew, and try to reconcile. Because none of them wanted the Snake Men to profit. The 3 tribes returned to their camps. Everyone understood the war had changed shape. This would not be a quick charge. It would be a protracted standoff, and the winner would be whichever side changed first. 5 years passed. For a dragon, that is basically a nap with better branding. For kobolds and gnolls, 5 years is enough for recruits to stop shaking when they hold a spear, for cubs to grow into workers, and for a messy camp to become a real power with walls, tactics, and enemies who now have to schedule their hatred properly. On the western defense line, the first few months were real fighting. Bloodex sent small gnoll parties to probe the line. Var sent mutated gnolls to counterprobe. Grayskin goblins rode forest wolves to harass the half-elf shooting positions. Deep furnace dwarves supplied iron axes and spearheads. The Abundance ogres answered by throwing stones into goblin formations, because sometimes civilization is just a big rock with timing. The clashes stayed small. A dozen or so fighters on each side, wounded, dragged back, then everyone changed locations and did it again the next day. Then the pattern got strange. The enemy always stopped before going too deep. Their retreats were orderly. Their attacks looked less like conquest and more like people clocking in for mandatory workplace violence. After one skirmish, Abundance captured a few prisoners and finally learned the truth. Bloodex, Grayskin, and Deep Furnace had all been driven west by the Snakeman tribe from the core area. The Snakemen wanted to use them to probe Abundance, but the 3 tribes did not want to die for someone else's dragon. Once Brack, Sivrin, Var, and Alira understood that, the whole confrontation changed. Both sides still performed hostility in public. Swords came out, bows were drawn, small units clashed in the open space between the lines. But the scale kept shrinking, casualties dropped, and the fights became almost rotational. You attack this week, we defend next week. Try not to kill anyone important. Peak fake war bureaucracy. Sometimes they even exchange trophies. A lost Abundance iron spearhead might be traded back for demonic beast fur. A Bloodex iron axe might be returned for rare, or the goblins had brought from the middle forest. The exchange point was the dead tree stump between the lines, where each side placed goods down, stepped back, and kept their dignity by saying absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the Abundance line improved. Half-elves built fixed shooting platforms in the tree crowns and reinforced them with vines. Kobold swordsman shieldbearers built a stronger inner wall behind the log fence using ogre-hauled stone and half-elf-grown ironwood. Gnoll hunters cut covert ambush passages through the dense western forest. The ogres also behaved better. They moved stones, carried lumber, repaired fortifications, then squatted at the rear to eat, sleep, and enjoy the finest career path an ogre could imagine. One of them summed it up perfectly. Before, moving stones and mining meant not eating full. Now, moving stones meant eating full. Honestly, flawless employee satisfaction survey. The mixed army improved too. At first, their tactics were simple. Archers cover, infantry push, gnolls flank. Over 5 years, the battlefield became a training ground. Half-elves strung vine tripwires across the open space. Kobold shieldbearers pressed from the front when enemies stumbled. Gnoll hunters hit from both forests to cut off retreats. Ogres threw stones first to smash formation. Half-elves followed with volleys, and kobolds plus gnolls swept the field. 5 years of fake fighting had accidentally built a better army. Marith Morvathrin, however, was not enjoying the character development. In the core area, the power he sensed from the west had not faded. It had grown clearer and richer every year. He tried sleeping through the desire, but every time he closed his eyes, that aura bothered him until rest became impossible. Worse, his own time was running out. He was about to enter the adult dragon bottleneck that year. If he could not break through in the next few years, he would fall into the long slumber of ordinary green dragons, and by then even wanting to act would not matter. So Marith snapped. He summoned Selara and gave the order. The 3 tribes had 10 days to launch a full-scale attack. If they were still standing around after 10 days, he would personally lead the Snakeman army west, destroy the 3 tribes first, then destroy Abundance. 10 days, there it was. The clock finally stopped politely ticking and started punching people in the throat. Selara understood the danger immediately. Those tribes had never truly submitted, and after 5 years of soft skirmishes, forcing them into a full attack might push them straight into Abundance's camp. But Marith was a chromatic dragon in a rage, and she was his subordinate. Her dragon blood came from him. Her life belonged to him. She could advise details, not overturn his decision. So she bowed and carried the ultimatum. When the Snakeman envoy delivered it to Bloodex, Crag did not explode in front of him. That part came after the envoy left. He called Nybek and Doran into the tent and laid it out. 10 days, a full-scale attack. If they failed, the green dragon would come collect their heads. Doran said what everyone already knew. The Snakemen were forcing them to march to death. They had fought Abundance for 5 years. A full attack might not break that line, and even if it did, the survivors would be too weak to face the Snakemen afterward. So he proposed the only gamble left. Sell out the Snakemen and ally with Abundance. Crag agreed. That night, they sent an old Bloodex hunter across the dead tree stump corridor with a white animal skin flag. He was the same kind of old hand who had traded spoils there before. So Abundance patrols recognized him and brought him to Brack and Sivrin. The message was ugly and useful. The Snakeman tribe had 6 generals above level 10 and a 3,000-strong army. Behind them stood Marith Morvathrin, a young green dragon more than 12 meters long, around level 15, who had killed a level 16 ogre warlord years ago. And the ultimatum was real. Within 10 days, launch a full attack, or the Snakemen and Marith would destroy the 3 tribes first and Abundance next. The tent went quiet. Then Alira said what the others had been circling without naming. Varen was not an ordinary green dragon. Only an aberrant dragon could give dependents this level of bloodline mutation, make plants respond during his sleep, and cover the forest with unconscious power. And not just any aberrant dragon, one with supreme talent, the kind that could become a legend or even reach demigod status if he survived long enough. So yes, Marith was not smelling a snack. He was smelling the future and thinking he could swallow it. After the old hunter was taken away to rest, Brack, Sivrin, Var, and Alira sat in silence for a long time. Brack broke it first. The 3 tribes had been forced to a dead end, and now the knives pointed at Abundance were being handed over hilt first. If handled well, those tribes would help them fight the Snakemen. If handled badly, they would have no face to show Varen when he woke. Var gave the practical read. Crag genuinely wanted to fight. Nybek was timid, but his goblins were useful for harassment and reconnaissance. Doran was slippery, but once he chose a side, he was unlikely to betray it. Sivrin opened the notebook he had kept for 5 years and proposed the terms. They could ally, but only through a dragon blood contract sworn in Varen's name. During the war against the Snake Men, the 3 tribes would be uniformly coordinated by abundance. No fleeing before battle, no private peace with the Snake Men, no backstabbing. After the war, spoils and territory would be distributed by contribution. Illyra would keep the contract until Varen awakened and personally confirmed it. The next noon, both sides met at the dead tree stump. For the first time in 5 years, the opposing leaders stood face to face in the same clearing. Crag, Nybek, and Doran on one side, Var, Illyra, Brack, and Sivrin on the other. Sivrin's animal skin alliance pact lay on the stump. Crag accepted the conditions, but added one request. The 3 tribes knew the core area, Snakeman tactics, and Marith's battle habits better than Abundance did. They would provide the intelligence. Abundance would provide the main strength. They would charge shoulder to shoulder, and nobody would hide in the back. Illyra pushed the pact forward. Crag pressed his blood print onto it. Nybek followed. Doran pressed his blood print last and said he could follow Abundance's rules. The 5-year standoff became a formal alliance. And at that exact moment on Rock Hill, inside the Vine Hall sealed for years, emerald dragon eyes opened in the dark. Golden wheatear patterns flickered deep inside Varen's pupils. The nature sprites outside stopped moving and turned toward the hall. Every half-elf who had awakened plant control talent felt it. At the front line, Illyra and the others froze. The Dragon Lord had awakened. Far away, Leora Vale, now firmly established as Count of the Forest with tens of thousands of troops and hundreds of thousands of territory citizens, also sensed something and looked toward Sunset Forest. Varen's first feeling after 5 years was hunger. Extreme hunger. His body had grown to more than 9 meters long, with a wingspan almost twice what it had been before he slept. But before he could inspect himself properly, he noticed something new in his consciousness. Not just the few dependents who carried his dragon blood. Tens of thousands of life signals now connected to him. Following the nearest ones, he saw hundreds and hundreds of pixies crawling out from flower beds, watchtower petals, and medicinal herb bushes, each carrying something bigger than itself. Berries, herb leaves, magical dewdrops collected drop by drop from the plants. Their feelings toward him were pure affection. The moment they sensed he was awake, the message spread through every pixie in the stockade. Creator awake, creator hungry, emergency food delivery. Hundreds of pixies streamed toward Rock Hill like a glowing river. Treants on patrol pulled their roots from the earth and moved to the forbidden zone at the hill's foot, guarding him in their own slow way. The kobolds, gnolls, and half-elves at headquarters panicked first because they thought the Dragon Lord was still sleeping, and the little glowing delivery mob might wake him. Then Varen's voice came from the top of Rock Hill. Let them pass, and bring meat. The more the better. The stockade instantly lost its mind. A kobold sprinted toward the pigpen shouting that the Dragon Lord had awakened, and they needed meat. Pig handlers grabbed the 3 fattest adult venom pigs. Gnoll hunters dragged out an entire earthrending bear hunted the day before. Half-elves carried baskets of cured meat and dried mushrooms. Inside the vine hall, the sealed walls parted under Varen's will, dust falling from the layers of vines. Pixies poured in first and piled berries, herb leaves, and magical dewdrops in front of him. Then came the real food. Varen started eating like a dragon who had missed 5 years of meals. Because technically, yes. As he ate, everyone finally saw what he had become. He was rank 13, more than 9 meters long, with horns wrapped in golden thread vine patterns. Fine golden-green wheatear marks edged his scales and wing membranes. A faint ring of golden patterns circled his pupils. He no longer felt like a normal green dragon. In his own mind, the title changed. Abundance Dragon, and the sleep had given him more than size and rank. His green dragon bloodline and abundance power had fused. By consuming power, he could grant life to lifeless things. He could even animate a region, turning the forest within several miles into his domain, making trees and vines into his eyes, ears, and arms. He could not animate an entire forest yet, but several miles that he could manage. Then rapid marching echoed outside. Brack, Sivrin, Illyra, Var, and Grick had force-marched back from the front the moment they sensed him awaken. With them came Crag, Nybek, and Doran, each bringing a dozen personal guards. They passed the reinforced defenses, orderly camps, stockade gates, pixies, treants, and finally reached the vine hall grown out of Rock Hill. Crag stopped at the entrance and looked up in silence. 5 years earlier, he had thought abundance was a few gnolls and half-elves playing settlement. Then he discovered iron weapons, formations, and ogres. Now he saw mutated troops filled with the same power as the hall itself, all looking at Varen with real reverence. That was when Crag realized he might have made the smartest decision of his life by asking for an alliance. Nibek hid beside Doran, muttering that they were only here to visit. Doran said nothing, but his eyes stayed on the hall entrance. He wanted to see what kind of being could make this many monsters follow without hesitation. Inside, Brack, Sivrin, Alira, Var, and Grick knelt before the dragon throne. Varen, meanwhile, was dumping half a basket of smoked meat into his mouth. He looked down at them, chewed, and said, "Long time no see." Then he kept eating. Dragon Lord behavior. Alira stepped forward and welcomed him back on behalf of all Abundance dependents, telling him the tribe had become one of the strongest forces in the forest during his slumber. Varen nodded. Sivrin began the report. Kobolds had broken 5,000. 5 years earlier, the whole tribe had been under 2,000 total. Now the kobolds alone had more than tripled through births, defectors, captives, and expansion. Gnolls exceeded 1,000, up from fewer than 300 under Var, helped by expanded hunting grounds, 3 incorporated small gnoll tribes and new cubs. Ogres had grown to more than 30. They started with 11 captives, then more strays trickled in from the middle forest, including some driven out by the snake men and some who heard the magical phrase, "Ogres here can eat their fill." That recruitment slogan should not work. It absolutely worked. Half-elves had broken 3,500, with growth from natural births and a small number of exiles from the Elven Empire border. Their awakened spell talent had also risen sharply. More than 100 total awakened, and 63 could skillfully manipulate it. The whole tribe had nearly doubled, mostly because kobolds reproduce like the logistics department forgot to set a limit. Then Sivrin moved to the threat. The Snake Man tribe in the core area wanted them. Behind the Snake Men was Marith, a young green dragon around level 15 who had killed a level 16 ogre warlord. 5 years ago, the Snake Men had driven Bloodaxe, Greyskin, and Deep Furnace west to test Abundance. After years of reduced conflict, the Snake Men issued a 10-day ultimatum forcing a full attack. The 3 tribes had contacted Abundance, revealed their intelligence, and signed the alliance contract the previous noon. During the war, they would follow Abundance coordination, with no fleeing, no private peace, and no backstabbing. Spoils and territory would be divided by contribution. Alira held the pact until Varen confirmed it. Varen finally finished most of the food and looked toward Crag, Nibek, and Doran at the entrance. Crag stood straight, pretending not to be afraid while his claws dug into his palms. Doran stood silent with his arms crossed, meeting Varen's gaze. Nibek hid behind the dwarf with half a head visible. Because a goblin's relationship with dragons is usually hide now, explain never. Varen already knew who they were and what Marith was. Level 15, close to Great Master Breakthrough, killer of a level 16 ogre warlord. That was strong, but Varen had just awakened something new. Crag stepped forward and gave respect first. Then he said the 3 tribes knew the core area, Snake Man deployment, and Marith's habits, so they could provide intelligence for the alliance. But before the formal battle, they needed to understand Varen's strength. An alliance needed a primary and secondary party, and strength decided who led. Doran backed him up. Dwarves did not like fighting battles without knowing the chance of victory. Abundance's army was strong, but they needed to see Varen's own power with their own eyes. The hall temperature changed instantly. Alira's dragon wings spread. Brack's hand went to his axe. Sivrin's staff lit up. Var dropped into a combat stance. Grick stood slightly behind them, the only senior leader without dragon blood, and mostly looked impressed by the visitor's courage. He had seen Varen crush a 2-headed ogre as a hatchling, so he was not worried. He just knew this was about to become educational. Varen, however, was interested. He had slept 5 years, eaten half the stockade, heard a report full of new problems, and gained powers he had not tested yet. Conveniently, someone had volunteered to be the tutorial. He lifted one claw, stopping Alira, and looked at Crag, Doran, and the hiding Nibek. All of you at once. He wanted to see what kind of allies his people had chosen. Crag drew his iron axe and released the full aura of an 11th rank gnoll warlord. Doran unfastened his warhammer, dark golden battle chi wrapping the head as his dwarven strength cracked the flagstones beneath his boots. As a 12th rank dwarf warrior, he could rank high even among the knights of a human duchy. Their personal guards drew weapons too, forming a semicircle. Then Crag and Doran charged. Varen did not get off the thrones. He did not even change his lounging posture. The wheatear patterns in his pupils brightened, the floor split open, and 2 trees 5 to 6 meters tall erupted from the flagstones in front of the dragon throne. Their empty eye sockets glowed in sync with Varen's pupils. These were not ordinary moving trees. Varen had briefly given them true life and combat instincts. For that short time, they could judge angles, defend, and attack like real warriors. One branch met Crag's axe. The blade cut less than half an inch before the bark trapped it. Then another branch whipped out and sent Crag flying into the wall with his axe still in hand. Doran held better. His stance absorbed the first hit, but the stone under his boots cracked outward. Then multiple branches struck together, driving him back dozens of steps until his back slammed into a pillar near the hall door. His hammer still trembled in his hands. The guards froze. Their leaders had just been slapped across the room by two treants Varen summoned while lying down. What were they supposed to do? Contribute decoration damage. The treants stood on both sides of the throne, roots sinking back into the cracked floor, branches extended in warning. Varen had not moved one step. He knew the treants were only using a tiny portion of his abundance power. If he wanted, he could strengthen them to 11th rank, 13th rank, or beyond. In this vine-covered hall, he could turn the whole place into a living fortress. But for these two challengers, 11th rank was enough. Varen looked down at Crag panting by the wall and Doran bracing himself against the pillar. Then his eyes narrowed with clear amusement. How is it? Is my strength qualified? Crag and Doran wanted to test my strength. One quick lesson later, Crag was against the wall, Doran was against a pillar, and both of them had discovered the ancient art of being quiet. Crag dropped his weapon and knelt first. The level 11 Bloodaxe warlord admitted he was convinced. From now on, Bloodaxe would honor me as alliance leader. If abundance pointed east, they went east. If I pointed at an enemy, they hit it. Doran followed. Deep Furnace Keep had seen the bearing of a legend in me, so their dwarves would stand under my command and not regret it. Nybek came out last, still shaking, and said Grayskin would also follow. Smart Goblin, terrified, yes, but terrified on the winning side. Since I was alliance leader now, I gave them a little more than fear. Two vines dropped from the hall roof and touched Crag and Doran's shoulders. Emerald light spread through them. Crag's bruise vanished in seconds. Doran's strained arm healed just as fast. For Crag, this was beyond any Knoll ointment, Snake Man powder, or stolen healing potion he had ever used. For Doran, it was even clearer. Dwarves were hard to injure but slow to heal. His arm should have hurt for days. Instead, even old battlefield aches faded. The guards stared. Nybek peeked out properly for the first time. Strength made them kneel. Healing made them understand. Doran formally recognized my strength and breadth of mind. He said Deep Furnaces, hammers, and forges would be mine after the war if I needed them. Wonderful. I woke from a 5-year nap and acquired a weapons department. Then I did the most dragon thing possible. I refused administration. I told them to discuss troop deployment and details with Alira and the others. Those things were not my business, and I did not want to manage them. Very important principle. I am a dragon lord, not a tired clerk with wings. Everyone withdrew. Brack, Sivrin, Alira, Var, and Grick bowed first. Crag bowed again at the doors. Nybek tried one sneaky look back, met my eyes, and hid behind Doran. The hall went quiet. Pixies still carried berries and herb leaves. Treants returned to the Forbidden Zone as guards. I rested my chin on my claws, full and sleepy. Then a mental communication request reached me. It came from the human girl who signed a master-servant contract with me 5 years ago. Leora Vale. I accepted through the contract thread. Her council hall appeared in my mind. Maps covered the table. Ink was still wet. The silver-threaded vine flag of House Forest hung on the wall. Then I saw Leora. I almost did not recognize her. 5 years ago, she was a desperate noble girl running through Sunset Forest. Now she wore Account's formal clothes, stood steady, and had reached level 12. Her eyes were the same, just colder, more tired. Then I sensed the real problem. Abundance backlash. The power I gave her had helped her win, rebuild, heal, and rule. But every use had eaten deeper into her body. Her face could still pass as normal. The rest of her probably could not. If her enemies learned the Count of the Forest was being devoured by her own power, they would come smiling with knives under the paperwork. I did not expose it yet. Leora knelt and welcomed me back as her master. She admitted that 5 years ago, when she accepted the contract, she had been terrified. She feared I would use her and throw her away like the nobles who betrayed her. But in Forest City, she swallowed my dragon blood against Gorv. My power took root. She won. She reclaimed her title. She rebuilt the city. She locked Isolde Brandt, the woman who killed her father, inside the manor. When tens of thousands knelt by the lava lake and shouted her name, she did not think of ancestors, kings, or knights. She thought of me. She wanted to know if I saw it, if she had fulfilled the promise from 5 years ago. And listen, that one landed. I gave her 1 drop of blood and 1 contract. She turned it into a whole earldom. That is not investment return. That is the investment arriving with escort cavalry. Then Leora switched back into count mode. The forest earldom was fully under her control. Gold coins, gems, and magic materials had been prepared for 3 years. If I wanted them, she could send carriage fleets to Sunset Forest or directly to Abundance. She called it my property. She was only keeping it safe. I told her treasure could wait. First, I needed her report. She started with livelihood. For 5 years, she had irrigated the main farmlands with abundance power. Crop cycles shortened by about one-third. Catastrophic pests and diseases were gone. Food output had nearly quadrupled. The earldom could feed itself and export wheat and wine. Registered commoners exceeded 300,000. About 30,000 could take basic militia training. The people now had enough food and surplus grain to trade. Border poverty got upgraded into exports. My bloodline apparently looked at feudal economics and chose violence against hunger. Then came the army. The heavy cavalry regiment had 800 soldiers, all above rank 3. With horse armor, fine steel plate armor, lances, longswords, and shields. The elite infantry regiment had 2,000 soldiers, all above rank 2, with refined iron spears, short swords, shields, and full logistics. The city garrison had 1,200 troops. If needed, she could draft tens of thousands of militia, but they could not match the standing army. Her high-end power was even better. Oral Vale, the strongest of House Forest, was still a level 16 swordsman. His health had been poor since the battle with Gorv, so Leora had to replenish him with abundance power, but his strength remained. She also commanded 10 powerhouses from level 10 to level 15, plus dozens from level 7 to level 10. Several old rank 3 knights I had met were now level 10 elite knights. On paper, Forest Earldom was no weaker than a normal duchy's direct legion. The girl had cooked hard. I told her she did better than I expected. Then I gave her the problems. Marith Morvathrin, the green dragon in the core area, was level 15. He had 6 Snakeman generals above level 10 and thousands of Snakeman troops. I had accepted 3 medium-sized tribes as allies, but a head-on clash still had variables. So I needed her. She did not need to bring all heavy cavalry. Cavalry could not fully deploy in the forest. She would bring part of the elite infantry, all knights above level 10, and come personally. She could decide the exact forces, as long as the earldom stayed guarded. Then I told her what she needed most. After she reached abundance and finished this battle, I would personally solve the power inside her body. Her breathing stopped for a moment. Her hand trembled against her glove. She knew I had seen the secret. She also believed me. She said she would muster troops, arrange the territory, and reach abundance within half a month. Then the call ended. Cut to Forest Earldom. Leora opened her study door and ordered every officer above captain rank to gather. Cut to Bloodex camp. That night, a knoll hunter slipped out during the guard shift change. He dug a communication rune from under an old tree, placed a bark message inside, and disappeared. He had worked for the Snakemen for a long time. Why? They paid too much. Classic betrayal. Simple payroll department. The message reached Selara in the core area. All 3 tribes had defected. They had signed a formal alliance with Abundance. Command now belonged to Abundance, and Abundance's true master was another green dragon. Selara had expected trouble, but this still chilled her. She took the report to Marith's. In the ancient tree nest, Marith's sleep was already failing. The power sent from the west had grown weaker lately, and his patience was almost gone. Selara read the message. Marith's eyes snapped open. He rose from his gold pile, 12 meters of rage and greed, and cursed the 3 tribes as traitors. Then he ordered full mobilization. Every Snakeman who could hold a weapon would march. All 6 generals would go. The slave legion would go too. Ogres, gnomes, goblins, everything that could move. The slaves would walk in front and take the first arrows, and Marith would personally lead the expedition. That mattered. For years, he had never left the core area. Even when he killed the ogre warlord, Selara and the generals fought first, and he only struck the final blow. Now he was marching himself. The Snakeman war machine woke up. 3,000 regular Snakemen formed lines. Another 3,000 reserves received weapons. From the slave pens came 400 chained ogres, more than 800 gnomes, and more than 800 goblins with crude stone hammers and wooden spears. At sunrise, the army moved. 6,000 Snakemen marched in 6 phalanxes. The 2,000 slave legion went first. 400 ogres in front, over 800 gnomes on the sides, and over 800 goblins behind them. Advance meant death. Retreat meant death. The Snakemen had invented motivation with no good options. Behind them, Marith's ancient tree fortress pulled its roots from the earth. Dragon runes lined the hollow trunk. The rank 16 ogre warlord skull floated at the center, feeding the magic array. Marith coiled in the crown and stared toward Abundance. He wanted my power. Back at Abundance, Illyra finalized the coalition with Brack, Sivrin, Var, Grick, Crag, Doran, and Nybek. Abundance fielded 1,000 kobold swordsman shieldbearers under Brack and Sivrin, as the frontal core. Var led 400 Knoll hunters for flanks and forest ambush. Illyra led 400 half-elf archers and rangers for ranged fire and spell support. More than 30 ogres joined the vanguard to smash the enemy slave legion. The allies added their forces. Crag brought 600 Bloodex Knolls into Var's flank formation. Doran brought 300 armored deep furnace dwarves with warhammers, stationed behind the kobold shield wall for breaches. Nybek brought 1,500 grayskin goblins for harassment, scouting, and chaos. He promised to do his best. Crag glared. Nybek immediately promised to definitely do his best. Close to 4,300 fighters. 6 races, 3 new allies, 1 defense plan with no room for nonsense. Another cut hundreds of miles away. Leora stood on Forest City's wall. 2,000 elite infantry formed outside the gate in fine iron half-plate. 4 knights above rank 10 rode at the front. 20 rank 8 to rank 9 knights followed. Leora rode a black warhorse. Oral Vale rode beside her with his new longsword. Trusted retainers would handle government affairs. An old knight would command the garrison. Everything was arranged. Leora ordered the army to set out. Officially, this was a joint cleanup operation in Sunset Forest. Unofficially, she was answering my call. Moving 2,000 elite infantry on the border is not exactly stealth. Northern Earl spies reported first. Greycastle spies followed and counted the knight ranks. Royal intelligence also noticed and linked the movement to Leora's experience in Sunset Forest 5 years ago. Everyone wanted to know why the Count of the Forest, the woman called the Apostle of God after destroying the Flame Demon clone, was personally marching into Sunset Forest. Meanwhile, the Snakeman vanguard entered the Middle Forest. The ancient tree fortress followed. At the Abundance defense line, morning campfires still smoked. Sentries had just changed shifts. The brief pace held for 1 more breath. Then all sides were in motion. Snakemen, Abundance, Forest Earldom, everyone was moving toward the same war. And I was dozing on the throne. Then my consciousness got pulled into a mental space. This was not like a contract call. That feels like someone knocking on my mind. This felt like someone opened the door, walked inside, sat down and waited. Rude, also divine, I opened my eyes in a space made of intent. Under me stretched a faintly glowing void realm. The whole place trembled with the breathing of something much larger. At the center sat the being my bloodline memories could never ignore. Tiamat, the 5-colored dragon mother, the goddess of 5-colored evil dragons. She appeared in human form, wrapped in flowing red, blue, green, black, and white radiance. Her smile looked gentle in the same way a trap looks flat before you step on it. She called me her dear child. I said nothing. When Tiamat starts a conversation, silence is just self-defense. She said she had noticed me when I signed the half-elf contract. After watching my strength rise from hatchling to young dragon level in a few years, she confirmed I was an aberrant dragon. 1 in 10,000. Then she made her offer. Submit to her, believe in her. In return, she would use divine power to raise me directly into legend. She said she only wanted faith. That sounds small until you remember who is asking. I checked my bloodline memories. The reviews were horrible. Every era said the same thing, do not trust Tiamat. One gifted red dragon once believed her, sacrificed his dragon nest and treasure hoard, received divine power and became a legend. Less than 20 years later, Tiamat used the faith contract to order him against an ancient gold dragon he could not defeat. He said the dragon mother would not harm him. Then the ancient gold dragon tore him in half. Tiamat handed his nest, thralls, and treasure to a more obedient red dragon. That story had more than 40 warning notes in dragon memory. The lesson was simple. Any dragon with half a brain does not believe Tiamat. Still, directly refusing a deity is how you become an educational corpse. So I stayed polite. I told Her Majesty that legend was only a matter of time for me. I appreciated her kindness, but I wanted to think more. Tiamat did not rage. She said I reminded her of another green dragon. A stranger one. He believed in money, food, and himself, but never gods. I knew that name from memories. Salex, the old green dragon who left recipe notes about venom pigs and once missed the best pursuit timing in battle because he stopped to taste an enemy general's roasted mount. Dragon history has legends. Apparently, it also has food critics with wings. Tiamat watched me, sighed that first there was one aberrant dragon and now another brat who would not listen, then raised her hand. 5-colored light spread. She said we would meet again. The space collapsed. I woke in the vine halls. The treants still guarded the restricted zone. Pixies slept in the corner hugging berries. No divine mark clung to my scales. No faith command sat in my mind. Tiamat had only come to talk, offer power, and leave after I refused. That made it worse. Marith was marching. The Snake Man army was moving. Leora was bringing human troops. The war around abundance was opening fast. But the thing that worried me most was not the 6,000 Snake Men, the 2,000 Slave Legion, the mobile tree fortress, or the jealous green dragon in its crown. It was Tiamat, because if the five-colored dragon mother visited me once and left smiling, then whatever she was planning had only just begun.